Chapter 380. Although Ling Shiqi was shocked by Sang Hetong's schemes and methods, he was also thinking hard about how to escape. He could clearly feel the qi and blood in his body gradually disappearing, but he could not move at all. The hand of earth had also lost its effect. He tried to switch between different techniques, but in the end, he could only move his body slightly when he used the extreme gold mysterious yang art. Ling Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. The gold attribute technique could indeed restrain this strange formation. His hands moved as if he was holding a flower, and a faint layer of Buddhist light appeared on his body. At the same time, a cloak made of silver holy energy appeared on his back. With the support of the gold attribute technique, the Buddhist light, and the holy energy, Ling Shiqi could finally take a step forward. Unfortunately, his walking speed was like that of an old man. Not only was it slow, it was also a little shaky. All right. Sang Hetong's tone suddenly changed. It's time to send you on your way. With that, he formed a series of hand seals. With him as the center, all the spirit cultivators within a radius of 300 meters exploded and died. Only spirit cultivators at the four realms of heaven could resist for a while, but they could not avoid such an outcome. In an instant, 2,000 to 3,000 people died. A dense blood aura soared into the sky. The blood of the spirit cultivators condensed into a river of blood that flowed into Sang Hetong's body. Sang Hetong's cultivation aura immediately soared, reaching the limit of unity of heaven and man. He was only one step away from breaking through to the sky origin realm and becoming the strongest in the world. Ha! Prince Heli roared. His body instantly transformed into a blazing dragon, wanting to break through the blood prison that trapped him. Unfortunately, the blood prison did not know what method it used. Under the full power attack of a late-stage unity of heaven and man expert, it kept trembling and twisting, but did not collapse. Prince Heli's expression finally changed. His actions attracted Sang Hetong's attention. He said sternly, I originally wanted to leave you last, but since you want to die, I'll send you on your way first. Sang Hetong changed his hand seal, and hundreds of blood-red tentacles suddenly appeared behind him and connected to Prince Heli's blood prison. After that, the tentacles started to rapidly absorb Prince Heli's blood essence and transfer it all to Sang Hetong. Of course, Prince Heli couldn't just sit there and wait for his death. However, the more fiercely he fought back, the faster his qi and blood disappeared. Even his spiritual power was being transferred to Sang Hetong. Sang Hetong smiled and said, It's useless. This sect master has spent dozens of years and countless resources to create this blood prison. Unless it's a heavenly origin stage expert, it's impossible to break this blood prison. Heli, oh Heli, you've always pretended to be reckless, but now you're really being reckless. The more powerful the spiritual technique you use, the more intense your blood and qi will be. You actually helped me, ha ha ha. Prince Heli immediately stopped. His eyes were bloodshot, as if he wanted to skin Sang He and swallow him alive. Prince Gus and Yuruifeng's eyes lit up as they tried to think of a way to escape. What a disgusting gaze. You should just die. Sang Hetong's face twisted. His qi and blood surged as he increased the rate at which he absorbed Prince Heli's blood essence. Prince Heli's burly body began to shrivel, but there was nothing he could do. He could only wait for his death. However, Prince Heli didn't struggle madly, nor did he scream in fear. Instead, he stared at Sang and Tong as though he wanted to imprint Sang and Tong's appearance into his soul. A moment later, the Grand Prince of Zhu Lu, a late-stage Prince Heli at unity with the world, turned into a dried corpse. Prince Gus roared, Sang Hetong, if I don't die, I'll let you know what it means to wish you were dead. Sang Hetong smiled contemptuously, don't worry. You'll be accompanying him soon. With a wave of his hand, the blood tentacles connected to Prince Heli separated and connected to Prince Gus and Yuruifeng. He wanted to absorb their blood essence at the same time. However, he didn't absorb the blood essence of the three unity with the world realms. Instead, they gathered around him and formed streams of blood. His cultivation was already at the limit of unity with the world realm. Thus, he needed to accumulate enough blood essence to break through to Sky Origin Realm. Everyone present was filled with despair. They couldn't move at all. Even Prince Heli, who was at unity with the world realm, died so easily. They would die here sooner or later. Ling Shiqi could move now. Sang Yitong's attention was on Prince Gus and Yu Ruifeng, so they didn't notice him. However, his movement speed was too slow. If this continued, he wouldn't be able to escape death either. His fate skill was still on cooldown. Thus, his only hope was Tu Dang. At this moment, a golden light cut through the fog created by the poison cleansing formation. It also cut through the blood essence in the sky and suddenly appeared. The golden light receded, revealing a person with ragged clothes and disheveled hair. It was Tu Dang. Seeing such a strange person suddenly appear, everyone was a little astonished. However, seeing how easily he barged in and didn't seem to be restrained by the formation, a strong sense of hope rose in their hearts. Ling Shiqi saw Tu Dang appear and his heart relaxed slightly. He didn't care about what would happen to others. At the very least, his own life was a little more secure. After all, he used the scripture to make a deal with Tu Dang not long ago to save him once. The moment Sang and Tong saw Tu Dang, their eyes widened in disbelief. Old fart, you actually managed to break free. How is this possible? Tu Dang said indifferently, nothing is impossible. You were able to comprehend the blood refinement formation from the ancient remnant scroll. You made the impossible possible. Sang Yitong put away his shocked expression and frowned deeply. What happened to your body? Why do you give me such a strange feeling? Tu Dang chuckled. This old man recently heard a saying, lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha. Sang Yitong, lay down the butcher's knife. It's not too late. What bullshit is this? Sang Yitong cursed, since you're here, help me break through to the sky origin realm. Tu Dang shook his head and didn't say anything else. Instead, he secretly transmitted to Ling Shiqi, little friend Lu, whether you can stop Sang Yitong or not, it's up to you. Ling Shiqi was stunned. Rely on him? What ability did he have to stop Sang Yitong? Tu Dang's voice continued to transmit. Ling Shiqi's expression changed several times before he finally nodded heavily. Chapter 381. Sang Yitong's hands formed hand seals and used all of his strength. The blood of all the cultivators in the plaza started to circulate crazily, and they were about to explode and die. Tu Dang also formed hand seals, and upon closer inspection, they were actually similar to Sang Yitong's hand seals. With his hand seals, the surging blood in the bodies of the other cultivators calmed down a lot. Sang Yitong was startled at first, but then he sneered, Master, oh Master, didn't you also cultivate this technique? You also want to use the blood sacrifice array to break through to the sky origin realm, right? You actually dare to boast and preach to me. The moment he said that, everyone's gaze landed on Tu Dang. This person was actually Sang Yitong's master. He was also the founder of the Gu God sect, the previous sect leader of the Gu God sect. From what they knew, Tu Dang should have died a few decades ago, but now, not only did he appear here, he even became enemies with Sang Yitong. There must be a lot of secrets behind this. However, now was not the time for them to investigate the relationship between the master and disciple. They only hoped that Tu Dang could help them escape. Although Tu Dang helped them temporarily suppress the surging blood, he did not care about Prince Gus and Yu Ruifeng. When Sang Yitong was fighting with Tu Dang, he did not stop absorbing their blood. Currently, the blood around him was increasing in number and density. The blood had already turned from bright red to dark red. Every single blood contained the boundless blood of an expert at the Unity of Heaven realm. Prince Gus and Yu Ruifeng's chi were also slowly decreasing. Old thing, even if you have cultivated the technique, the blood sacrifice array was modified by me. You do not have the authority to control it. Furthermore, your cultivation has already fallen to the initial stage of Unity of Heaven realm. As for me, I am at the limit of Unity of Heaven realm. What are you going to use to stop me? Tu Dang did not seem to make any movements, but a strange light suddenly shot out from his body, instantly connecting to Sang Hitong's body. It was the method he used to control the evil thoughts when Ling Shiqi helped him erase them. Sang Hitong's body immediately froze. Tu Deng then sat down cross-legged, and Sang Hitong was actually forced to imitate his actions. Sang Hitong's face immediately became sinister. He tried to control his body with all his strength, but in the end, he still sat down like Tu Deng. Old bastard. So what if you can control my body? As long as my will is still there, I can continue to control a portion of the formation and absorb the blood of those two. What can you do to me? Tu Deng continued to remain silent. Two streaks of golden radiance suddenly shot out from his eyes. However, they didn't shoot towards Sang and Tong, but rather towards Ling Shiqi. As the two golden rays entered his body, Ling Shiqi felt his feet lighten. He could move freely now. Ling Shiqi immediately used the ghostly spring steps and approached Sang Hitong in a few flashes. Sang Hitong laughed disdainfully. "TSK, so your trump card is this brat? What can a spiritual pulse stage ant do?" After Ling Shiqi got close, he ignored Sang Hitong and waved his hand. Golden goo worms crawled out of his body. It was the golden silk goo. Seeing this golden thread goo, Mulberry and Tong Tong's sneering expression instantly froze, and in the blink of an eye, they were horrified. Golden silk goo? You actually have the golden silk goo? Golden silk goo was a wondrous worm that countered Myriad's spirit-devouring technique. Back then, Sang Hitong had used the golden silk goo to trap Tu Deng, so he naturally knew the power of the golden silk goo. Once the golden silk goo entered his body, it would continuously absorb the spirit energy cultivated by his Myriad spirit-devouring technique. Not long after, his cultivation would plummet and he would no longer be able to control this formation. Once the formation was out of his control, all his plans would be for naught. However, he was already restricted by Tu Deng and couldn't even move a finger. How could he resist the golden silk goo? Sang Hitong would never have dreamed that the golden silk goo he used to harm Tu Deng would become his nightmare one day. However, Sang Hitong naturally wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. His eyes moved and a plan formed in his mind. Ling Shiqi was preparing to release hundreds of golden thread goo, but at this moment, the blood flowing around Sang and Tong rushed over in a frenzy. Ling Shiqi was already extremely wary of Sang Hitong. Even though he was a Unity of Heaven realm expert, he was still very terrifying. Thus, he was several meters away from Sang Hitong. However, a portion of his attention was used to control the golden silk goo and he didn't expect Sang Hitong to be able to control Anshi's blood. The blood streams arrived in the blink of an eye. Ling Shiqi used ghostly spring ghost steps and dodged most of them, but he was still hit by several blood streams. However, the strange thing was, Ling Shiqi wasn't injured at all. Instead, a terrifying amount of vital energy and spirit energy surged out of his body. Shortly after, Ling Shiqi's spirit vein stage 9 cultivation started to rise at a visible speed. In just a few breaths of time, he reached the peak of spirit vein stage. Ling Shiqi was stunned. Sang Hitong was actually increasing his cultivation. Could it be that he had gone mad? However, Ling Shiqi's expression immediately changed because the power in his body was still increasing crazily. He even felt that his meridians were about to explode. He immediately understood that Sang Hitong wasn't crazy and wasn't trying to increase his cultivation. Sang Hitong wanted to use this method to make him explode. Sang Hitong's vital energy and spirit energy were all at the Unity of Heaven realm. It was also the power he was preparing to break through to the Heaven origin stage. How could Ling Shiqi, a spirit vein stage cultivator, withstand such enormous power? Sang Hitong was controlled by Tu Deng, so he couldn't use any offensive methods. Thus, he thought of this method to kill Ling Shiqi. At this moment, Tu Deng's expression became serious. However, he was already at his limit. He didn't have the energy to help Ling Shiqi. Right now, Ling Shiqi could only rely on himself. Ling Shiqi's thoughts raced. He knew that the most important thing to do now was to consume the power in his body. There were two ways to consume power. One was to expel it from the body, and the other was to absorb it. Ling Shiqi immediately took out his Qing Lin saber and prepared to use fleeting night blooming Sirius to deplete his energy. However, Sang Yitong's eyes flickered and the blood immediately wrapped around Ling Shiqi, preventing him from attacking. As a result, Ling Shiqi had no choice but to absorb the power. He hurriedly circulated the Heaven Fiend 9 Hell Demonic Beast sacrificial blood record to absorb the vital energy and strengthen his body. At the same time, he was preparing to do something crazy. That was to open his spirit vein. Currently, Ling Shiqi still had a few spirit veins in his body that hadn't been opened. Opening spirit veins required a large amount of spirit energy. He wanted to use this opportunity to forcefully open the remaining spirit veins. Although opening spirit veins required meticulous care, he had no other choice at this time. Chapter 382. Ling Shiqi was multitasking. While using this power to temper his body, he was also using the spirit energy to open up his spirit veins. However, even if he did not deliberately absorb the spirit energy, his cultivation was still rapidly increasing. He had already reached the limit of the spirit vein realm and could not continue to increase. If this continued, he would explode sooner or later. Ling Shiqi did not dare to hesitate. He held his breath and began to use his spirit energy to open up his spirit veins. Fortunately, he had opened up 50 to 60 spirit veins before. It could be said that his experience in this area was unparalleled. At this moment, even though he was controlling the violent energy, he was still able to open up a spirit vein. Immediately, he felt the pressure in his body lessen, and he felt much more comfortable. This method was effective. Ling Shiqi was overjoyed and continued to open up his spirit veins. As time passed, Ling Shiqi opened up one spirit vein after another, consuming a large amount of the terrifying energy in his body. Sang and Tong sensed that something was wrong. According to common sense, Ling Shiqi should have exploded and died. However, after a long time, he was still fine. In fact, his body strength had increased greatly. Sang and Tong could see that Ling Shiqi was a little strange. However, this was the only way he could think of to kill Ling Shiqi. He steeled his heart and injected all the blood around him into Ling Shiqi's body. Ling Shiqi finally consumed a portion of his spirit energy. However, at this moment, an even greater amount of energy surged in, causing him to spit out a large mouthful of blood. Now, Ling Shiqi had opened up 71 spirit veins. With only one more, he could open up all 72 spirit veins in his body. Ling Shiqi was both sad and happy. He was happy because he had done something that ordinary people could not do or even dare to think about. However, he was sad because once he opened up all the spirit veins, how would he consume the energy in his body? However, I can only take one step at a time. Let's open the last spirit vein first. Thinking of this, Ling Shiqi focused all his attention on opening the 72nd spirit vein. After a short while, Ling Shiqi's body seemed to make a faint sound, and then his whole body suddenly trembled. The 72 spirit veins in his body were always the same, as if they had formed a great cycle that never stopped. At the same time, an invisible force suddenly poured into Ling Shiqi's body. However, this power didn't make him feel uncomfortable. Instead, it helped him open a door in his spirit sea. It was as if a switch had been turned on in his body, and all his power poured into the door. Ling Shiqi's aura rose again, but strangely, his aura was already comparable to the spirit aperture realm, even though he was still in the spirit pulse realm. His current cultivation level was higher than the 9th level of the spirit pulse stage, but he had yet to reach the spirit aperture stage. What realm is this? Even Ling Shiqi was confused, but unfortunately, no one could explain it to him. For the time being, he called this realm Spirit Pulse Stage 10. The good news was that once the door was opened, it was like a black hole, and it didn't reject the tyrannical power produced by the blood flow, and swallowed it all. Gradually, the door in Ling Shiqi's spirit sea was almost full. Just when his spirit sea couldn't hold any more spirit energy, something unexpected happened. A pitch-black aura suddenly appeared between Ling Shiqi's eyebrows, and the black aura formed a strange rune on his forehead. Then, the rune flashed, and a tyrannical, cold, and unstoppable aura that seemed to come from ancient times suddenly invaded his spirit fantasy world. A sea of memories that didn't belong to him appeared in his mind, and blurry images automatically appeared. Countless strange monsters fought in the sky and on the ground, and the power that swept through the heavens and earth seemed to want to shatter this space. A sea of blood, a mountain of corpses, a throne of bones, a mysterious altar, and a magnificent totem pole standing between heaven and earth. The images finally stopped at a group of ghost-like creatures. They didn't seem to have a physical body, but they could travel between heaven and earth at will. Unknowingly, 3 words suddenly imprinted in Leng Shiqi's mind: Dark Shadow Clan. These strange images appeared suddenly, and disappeared even more suddenly. Before Leng Shiqi could react, they all disappeared. As for the mysterious rune on his forehead, it continued to flash, and began to actively absorb the power in the blood flow. The more power the rune absorbed, the darker it became. In the end, the rune suddenly stopped after absorbing half of the power in the blood flow, and then mysteriously disappeared, as if it had never appeared. Everything happened too quickly. Although it took a long time to describe, only 2 or 3 breaths of time had passed since Leng Shiqi opened the 72 spirit veins. However, in this short period of time, Leng Shiqi had absorbed a large amount of blood energy. Sang Yitong's face was filled with shock. Impossible, impossible. Why aren't you dead yet? He roared like a madman, and blood veins covered his entire body. A strong wind stirred around him, and his hands that were controlled by 2 Deng actually moved, forming a simple seal. Among the remaining Imperial guards, more than half of the spirit cultivators instantly exploded into a bloody mist. A large amount of blood energy and spirit energy gathered again, forming a blood ball that wrapped around Leng Shiqi. Let's see if you die or not. Seeing this, 2 Deng sighed deeply. Evil disciple, you've already gone mad. Sang Yitong turned a deaf ear to his words. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the blood ball that enveloped Leng Shiqi. As for Leng Shiqi, he immediately felt that his spiritual sea was about to burst open, and even his body was riddled with wounds. Leng Shiqi's heart moved, and he took out 2 pills from the system space. They were the Spirit Whirlpool Pill and the Awakening Pill. He was preparing to use this opportunity to forcefully break through to the Spirit Aperture realm. Of course, this method was full of danger, but Leng Shiqi didn't have any other choice. He raised his head and swallowed the 2 pills at the same time. When the Spirit Whirlpool Pill entered his body, it immediately turned into a sticky liquid that flowed into his spirit sea. The sticky liquid adhered to the liquid spirit energy, and the spirit energy began to slowly rotate. The rotation speed became faster and faster, and gradually, it seemed to form a whirlpool. This was the Spirit Whirlpool. It was one of the requirements to break through to the Spirit Aperture realm from the Spirit Pulse realm. Leng Shiqi's limitless power from the Spirit Whirlpool Pill and blood instantly completed the evolution. Right now, Leng Shiqi only needed to open one of the 360 spirit apertures in his body to break through to the Spirit Aperture realm. Then, Leng Shiqi would have to make a choice. Right now, among all the cultivation methods he had, only the 10,000 Goose Spirit Devouring Technique, Golden Mystic Yang Technique, Cold Underworld Secret Technique, and 5 God Flowing Light Technique recorded the methods to open the spirit apertures. Depending on the characteristics of the cultivation method, the Spirit Aperture realm would have different choices when breaking through. Leng Shiqi hesitated for a moment, and decided to choose the 5 God Flowing Light Technique. Although the 10,000 Goose Spirit Devouring Technique was a complete 8th level cultivation method, it had a fatal enemy, the Golden Silk Goo. The Golden Mystic Yang Technique was the weakest among the 4 cultivation methods, and the Cold Underworld Secret Technique had too much Yin Qi. Thus, the 5 God Flowing Light Technique was the best choice. Leng Shiqi's heart moved, and the spirit qi in his body gathered. With the help of the Awakening Pill, he quickly opened a spirit aperture. A star-like light shone on his chin, which meant that he had finally broken through to the Spirit Aperture realm. Chapter 383. Leng Shiqi's process of breaking through to the Spirit Aperture realm was exceptionally smooth. Whether it was condensing the spirit spirals or opening the spirit apertures, it was as simple as water flowing through a canal. It was so simple that even Ling Shiqi himself had some doubts. However, after thinking about it, it wasn't impossible. He had already opened 72 spirit veins and had even entered the strange 10th level of the spirit aperture realm. It could be said that his foundation was abnormally deep. This could be considered his own foundation. On the outside, he had the spirit spirals pill, the awakening pill, and the terrifying power in his blood. With the support of these various powers, it was reasonable for him to easily break through to the spirit aperture realm. Ling Shiqi's aura suddenly changed. Waves of spirit aperture realm aura surged out. The moment he broke through to the spirit aperture realm, his illusion world suddenly shook. Ling Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the opportunity he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Nine Leave once said that she had two consciousnesses hidden in the depths of the illusion world. He guessed that one of them was Meng Tianzong and the other was the system. These two consciousnesses had given him great benefits. Not to mention the system, Meng Tianzong had helped him open 9 spirit veins in an instant, allowing him to quickly increase his cultivation. However, these two were also potential threats. Meng Tianzong was an existence even more terrifying than Sang and Tong. Ling Shiqi didn't think that it was a good thing for such a person to hide a consciousness in his illusion world. The system was even more mysterious. It seemed to have followed him through time. Originally, Ling Shiqi thought that the system didn't have its own consciousness, but it was actually hidden in the depths of his soul. This made Ling Shiqi feel uneasy. When a spirit cultivator entered the spirit aperture realm, they would be baptized by the power of heaven and earth. From there, they would be reborn and live longer. When breaking through to the spirit aperture realm, the spirit cultivator's soul would also be baptized. This could be said to be a sublimation of the soul. It was also an opportunity for Ling Shiqi to come into contact with the system's consciousness. Ling Shiqi used 72 spirit veins to break through to the spirit aperture realm. The spirit veins in his body were connected and grew endlessly. After he circulated the 5 God-flowing light art for one cycle, he could circulate it on his own and continuously absorb the power of the blood cocoon. As the illusory spirit world shook, he knew that his chance had arrived. Then, Ling Shiqi's consciousness sank into the spiritual illusion realm, and his spiritual body immediately underwent a huge change. Originally, his spiritual body was already the size of a 10-year-old child due to continuous cultivation. At this moment, his spiritual body was emitting wisps of white light. His body didn't grow bigger, but his skin, veins, and even every strand of hair on his body became extremely delicate. He was no different from himself. Not only that, but his eyes seemed to be able to see through the heavens and earth, and he immediately saw 2 figures. One of them was an illusory figure that was emitting a faint 7-colored light. His face could not be seen clearly. He was hiding at the edge of the illusory world. That was Meng Tianzong's consciousness. Ling Shiqi's eyes narrowed and became even more profound. He directly saw through the illusion world and saw a figure in the depths of his soul. It was an illusory figure that had the same appearance as Ling Shiqi, but at this moment, the illusory figure was curled up like a fetus and seemed to be sleeping. Ling Shiqi's heart moved, and his spiritual body floated into the depths of his soul. The moment Ling Shiqi appeared here, the system suddenly opened its eyes. There wasn't a trace of emotion in his eyes, as if he was a robot. Ling Shiqi's figure was reflected in his eyes, and there was finally a trace of inhuman coldness in them. The system's body stood up from its curled-up state, and it said in a cold, synthetic voice, "You shouldn't be here." Ling Shiqi was not in the mood to chat with the system. There was still great danger and trouble waiting for him outside, so he had to end this quickly. Ling Shiqi suddenly showed a murderous intent. Seeing this, the system laughed, but its smile was purely a smile. "You want to kill me? Your power comes from me, you can't kill me. Let's give it a try then," Ling Shiqi said as a sword materialized in his hand. The system said, "Do you want to use the 17 sword techniques of Mount Song, or the Shaoyang sword Qi? Try it." Saying this, the system's finger moved slightly, and Leng Shiqi suddenly felt like something was missing from his body. He tried to use the Shaoyang sword qi, but he suddenly realized that he did not know the Shaoyang sword qi at all. In Leng Shiqi's memory, the Shaoyang sword qi was clearly cultivated to perfection, but now he could not use it. He tried the 17 sword techniques of Mount Song, and the result was the same. Not only the sword techniques, but all the spiritual techniques on his body could not be used. In fact, he couldn't even use most of his cultivation techniques. The system's voice came, "Your techniques and spiritual techniques were all given to you by me. Your power was given to you by me. You want to use the power I gave you to kill me, dream on. You're right." Leng Shiqi continued, "My power does indeed come from you, but it's not all of it." Before Leng Shiqi finished speaking, he suddenly threw out a punch and a palm. The fist was like a lion king shaking the forest and sinking the river. It was the Lion King wave-breaking fist. That palm was 6 palms combined into one, and poisonous flames raged. It was the 6-yang poisonous fire palm. Facing this punch and palm, the system's eyes were still calm. It did not use any spiritual techniques, and only waved its arm. The power of Leng Shiqi's fist and palm was instantly reduced to nothingness. You relied on yourself to cultivate spiritual techniques, which is a small accident. But if you want to kill me with this method, it is still a dream. At this time, Leng Shiqi's expression was also dignified. He calculated that he could not use the spiritual techniques cultivated by the system when facing the system. So he had been constantly comprehending, deducing, and fusing spiritual techniques. Reality proved that the fused spiritual techniques could be used, but Leng Shiqi neglected one thing, and that was the system's strength. From the looks of it, the system did not have a cultivation realm, nor did it have any techniques or spiritual techniques, but it did have a mysterious power. That power could easily break his fist and palm. Leng Shiqi once again condensed a long spear. The spear's body was instantly dyed with a dazzling golden light, forming countless small scales. He pointed the spear at the system, and with an aura of death, he stabbed at the system. The system waved again, and the golden cross of the golden scale cross spear instantly dissipated. Leng Shiqi's expression didn't change. He pointed out a finger, and the sound of thunder could be heard. A blood-red bolt of lightning that was wrapped in a dense baleful aura and violent lightning energy shot out. Lightning blood heavenly finger. The system's lifeless eyes finally showed a trace of fluctuation. Its hands slid down at the same time, and the blood-red lightning disappeared into the void. Chapter 384. Leng Shiqi had used 4 fused ultimate skills in succession. Although it did not cause any damage to the system, he had noticed some clues. The system did not seem to be aggressive, and its defense was very simple. He immediately thought of the fact that the system had been curled up like a fetus in the beginning, which meant that the system might have been in a state of recovery. This also confirmed his guess when he first obtained the system. One of the reasons why the system chose him was to help the system recover its power. From the battle just now, the power of the thunderclap blood finger was enough for the system to take it seriously. Leng Shiqi's attack did not stop at all. His hands formed into claws, and the demonic aura around him surged. In the midst of the demonic aura, the shadow of a demonic dragon was faintly discernible. Immediately, a pair of demonic dragon claws descended. Demonic dragon claws. The system stretched out its arms and an invisible X-shaped energy sprayed out, instantly shattering the 2 demonic dragon claws. Leng Shiqi's long sword trembled, and his body suddenly disappeared. Then, a rain of flowers fell from the sky, turning into sharp sword energy. At the same time, hundreds of phantoms appeared from all directions, stabbing the sword energy from every angle. In an instant, the sword energy overflowed, and it was difficult to distinguish between the real and the fake. Dazzling flower confusion. At this moment, the system's eyes showed a touch of surprise and seriousness. This was the first time it had shown emotion. The system spread out its arms, and a translucent light shield appeared around it to protect it. Then, a dense clanging sound could be heard. The sword energy that filled the sky slashed on the light shield, causing the light shield to cave in continuously, but it was not broken. Before the sword chi dissipated, Ling Shiqi used the netherspring ghostly steps and charged forward like a ghost. He was holding a saber in his hand. The system's eyes locked onto the sword, and it actually felt a trace of threat from it. Ling Shiqi's figure arrived in the blink of an eye. The long sword was unsheathed, and a cold sword energy flashed in the air. That sword light was extremely fast and sharp, instantly shattering the light shield around the system. The system crossed its arms in front of its body, and the blade slashed across, leaving 2 deep slash marks on his arms. The strange thing was that there was no blood in the system's body. Instead, there were strange black and white characters. Upon closer inspection, those characters were clearly a series of codes. At this time, Ling Shiqi's spiritual body also quickly dimmed, and his body shrunk by more than half. It was obvious that the short-lived move had drained all of his energy. The system's eyes were filled with fear after seeing Ling Shiqi's attack. It looked at the weakened Ling Shiqi and said, "What a powerful sword technique. You can cultivate this technique without using my power. You are worthy of being my chosen host. However, this is the end of it. It's time for a new host. Even if I fall into a deep sleep again, I can't keep you." At this point, the system revealed a murderous intent towards Ling Shiqi. However, Ling Shiqi gave a strange smile. He suddenly slashed down with his palm like a saber, and an invisible force slashed out. There seemed to be a mirror between Ling Shiqi and the system's consciousness. At this moment, this mirror seemed to have been cut diagonally from the middle, and the inside and outside of the mirror were dislocated. Similarly, the system's body was also dislocated. The system's upper body still maintained its murderous appearance, but from below its left shoulder to the right side of its waist, an almost undetectable scratch appeared, splitting its entire body into 2. A large amount of black and white light surged out of its body. At this time, the system's face finally showed an expression. It was an expression of shock, fear, and disbelief. It shouted in horror, "No! Impossible, impossible." The technique Ling Shiqi used was the void-slashing godly sword, created by Tu Deng. This was a secret technique created by Tu Deng specifically to eliminate evil thoughts. It specialized in eliminating all kinds of consciousness. Evil thoughts, which were on par with Tu Deng's good thoughts, were easily eliminated by Ling Shiqi's sword. This showed how terrifying this secret technique was. However, this technique drained all of Ling Shiqi's strength, and made him completely lose the ability to fight. The system's body was divided into 2 halves, but the 2 halves were still connected by the black and white light. While the system exclaimed, it was still trying to retrieve the black and white light, as if that thing was extremely important to it. Seeing this, Ling Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. He forcefully controlled his spiritual body and began to snatch the black and white light. "Get lost. This is mine, it's all mine." The system roared in panic. It no longer had that godlike demeanor of looking down on mortals. Now, the 2 of them, with the system heavily injured and Ling Shiqi unable to continue fighting, began to wrestle with each other like street thugs. As they wrestled, they continued to fight for the black and white light. Ling Shiqi, who was in the middle of the tussle, made up his mind and began to swallow the black and white light. After swallowing it, Ling Shiqi's mind suddenly had some inexplicable things. More importantly, he felt that his strength had recovered a little. Although it was only a little, it was indeed recovered. Ling Shiqi was overjoyed and immediately began to swallow the black and white light that he had already snatched. The system felt the danger and worked even harder to retrieve the black and white light. When Ling Shiqi finished swallowing the black and white light that he had snatched, he felt that his strength had recovered about 20%. Although it was not much, it was enough. Ling Shiqi once again used his palm as a sword and slashed out with the void-slashing godly sword. The system's consciousness, which was already divided into 2 halves, was directly cut into 4 halves by this sword. Moreover, the system's consciousness's body was constantly collapsing, and the black and white light that it had just absorbed all spilled out again. Ling Shiqi's consciousness was also extremely weak. Not only did his body shrink rapidly, but he also became transparent and blurry. However, he was still frantically swallowing the black and white light that flowed out of the system's consciousness. Under this situation, the system's consciousness was on the verge of collapsing, and it had no power to compete with Ling Shiqi. It could only watch as Ling Shiqi swallowed all the black and white light. At this moment, Ling Shiqi raised his hand as if he was going to completely wipe out the system's consciousness. At this moment, the system's consciousness's head also split apart, and its lonely mouth spoke intermittently. Do you think this is the end? In the future, there will be a second me, a third me, and countless me's. You will die sooner or later. Ling Shiqi did not answer him. What answered him was the third sword, the void-slashing godly sword. The system's consciousness, which was already collapsing, finally turned into nothingness under this sword. Chapter 385. With the system's consciousness wiped out, Ling Shiqi finally let out a sigh of relief. However, there was no time for him to sigh, because there was still a huge crisis in the outside world that could take his life at any time. Ling Shiqi hurriedly controlled his spiritual body to return to the illusion world. Just as he was about to return to his body, a rainbow-colored figure suddenly appeared. It was Meng Tianzong's consciousness. Ling Shiqi's heart sank. He no longer had any ability to fight. If Meng Tianzong attacked him, he wouldn't be able to resist at all. He had always regarded the system's consciousness as his biggest enemy. He didn't think that Meng Tianzong would attack him from behind. Meng Tianzong's rainbow-colored figure pointed at the void, and a rainbow-colored light entered his body. Ling Shiqi was immediately shocked, but strangely, he wasn't injured, nor did he feel any pain. Instead, he felt a warm feeling. At the same time, the huge illusion character that had been sealed in his illusion world shook, and a rainbow-colored light flowed out. The chant for the second layer of the five-god flowing light technique appeared. Then Meng Tianzong's figure disappeared again. Just as Ling Shiqi was confused, he felt a huge change in his body. He hurriedly returned his consciousness to his body. The entire process of his fierce battle with the system seemed very long, but in reality, it had only lasted for a few breaths of time. At this moment, he opened his eyes, and his entire body immediately crackled like beans exploding. He looked down and saw that on his upper body and head, there were 80 to 90 star-like lights. These were all spiritual cavities. The spirit aperture realm was different from the spirit pulse realm. In the spirit pulse realm, every time you open a spirit pulse, you can break through a small realm. However, in the spirit aperture realm, you need to open 9 spiritual cavities to break through to the next realm. When you open 81 spiritual cavities, you'll be at the peak of the spirit aperture realm. As for Ling Shiqi, he actually managed to open a total of 80 spiritual cavities in an instant. These spiritual cavities were all spiritual cavities that the five-god flowing light technique needed to open. Ling Shiqi was shocked, but at the same time, he understood that the reason for this change must be because of Meng Tianzong's finger. When he was in the illusory spirit's secret realm, he had also opened 9 spiritual veins in an instant. Although he didn't know what Meng Tianzong was planning, at least it was beneficial to him now. Since he had already opened so many spiritual cavities, it meant that there were no obstacles in his cultivation advancement, and he could absorb the energy inside the blood cocoon without any restraint. From Ling Shiqi opening 72 spiritual veins, reaching the unprecedented 10th level of the spiritual vein realm, to the mysterious mark on his forehead, to the obliteration of the system and the opening of the spiritual cavities. All of this happened in an extremely short period of time. Sang He-tong and the surrounding people also felt that Ling Shiqi's aura had reached the spirit aperture realm, and their expressions became strange. From their point of view, Sang He-tong's method of exploding Ling Shiqi was strange, but it had a high chance of success. However, they never thought that Ling Shiqi would borrow this energy to break through to the spirit aperture realm. However, these people still didn't think highly of Ling Shiqi, because even if he was at the spirit aperture realm, he still wouldn't be able to withstand that terrifying energy. At most, he would be able to hold on for a while longer. Sang He-tong's expression was ugly as if he had eaten a fly, but his thoughts were the same as everyone else's. He hatefully said, "So what if you're at the spirit aperture realm? If you can't open your spiritual cavities, you'll still explode." Sang He-tong was right. For a spirit aperture realm cultivator, the hardest part wasn't the accumulation of spirit energy, but how to open their spiritual cavities. Spiritual cavities were different from spiritual veins. In fact, no matter which spiritual vein you opened, the method used was the same. As long as you had enough spirit energy and had meticulous control over your spirit energy, it wouldn't be too difficult. However, opening the spiritual cavities was completely different. Every spirit cultivator had 360 spiritual cavities, and every spiritual cavities had their own characteristics. Therefore, opening different spiritual cavities required different methods. And these methods, in a spirit cultivator sect, were passed down by word of mouth from the elders of the sect. In Sang He-tong's opinion, Ling Shiqi had just broken through to the spirit aperture realm and didn't know how to open the next spiritual cavities. Therefore, sooner or later, he would explode and die. Unfortunately, he didn't know that Ling Shiqi had already opened a total of 81 spiritual cavities. The spiritual cavities were no longer an obstacle to his cultivation. What he needed the most right now was spirit energy. Soon after, Ling Shiqi began to circulate the 5 God flowing light technique, absorbing the spirit energy in the blood cocoon like a whale. As for his cultivation, it was as if it had grown wings and soared into the sky. In half a cup of tea's time, his cultivation had exploded to the peak of the first level of the spirit aperture realm. Then, as if there were no bottlenecks between the first and second level, he broke through without any obstruction. Time continued to pass, and the blood cocoon around Ling Shiqi gradually faded. However, not only did Ling Shiqi not explode, his cultivation was actually increasing. Spirit aperture realm 2nd level, 3rd level, 4th level, 5th level. When he reached the 5th level of the spirit aperture realm, the blood cocoon around Ling Shiqi had become much dimmer. Spirit aperture realm required a lot of spirit energy to accumulate. Ling Shiqi had directly jumped from the 1st level to the 5th level, absorbing too much energy. As for Sang He-tong, he suddenly became stupefied because he realized that the energy he had accumulated was not enough for him to break through to the sky origin realm. Even if Ling Shiqi suddenly died, he, Sang He-tong, would not be able to break through. Sang He-tong's mouth trembled slightly as he muttered to himself, "How is this possible? How is this possible? No." He suddenly roared towards the sky, "Who are you? Who are you? It's you who did this." Sang He-tong suddenly looked towards Tu Deng. His body emitted strands of black qi as he roared like a madman. Tu Deng was also very shocked by the changes in Ling Shiqi. He originally thought that Ling Shiqi was definitely going to die, and felt a lot of guilt in his heart. Now that he saw that Ling Shiqi was not only fine, but his cultivation had also increased greatly, he chuckled, "Little friend Lu's fortune is profound, and his life is not meant to end. He is a person with destiny." Pay. What bullshit destiny? Back then, you said that I did not have the destiny to break through to the sky origin realm, but I will do it for you to see. So it was all because of my words. Sang He-tong, did you think that even if little friend Lu and I did not appear, you would have broken through to the sky origin realm? Wrong, you were completely wrong from the beginning. The sky origin realm is not something that can be broken through with brute force, so you were destined to fail. Just as they were talking, the blood cocoon suddenly released a blood-colored blade aura that seemed to cut the world in half. Chapter 386. Sang He-tong never thought that Ling Shiqi's cultivation would soar, and he even dared to attack him. In Sang He-tong's view, Ling Shiqi's strike was comparable to a gang spirit realm master's strike. It was indeed amazing. Such a strike was nothing to Sang He-tong in the past, but now he was under Tu Deng's control and had no room to fight back. This was dangerous. Even though he was in the unity of heaven and men realm, he had not specially tempered his body. If he was hit by this strike, he would definitely die. The blood veins on Sang Hetong's body suddenly increased, and he looked like a man of blood. His body split open, and dozens of goo worms of different colors and shapes rushed out. Originally, with Sang Hetong's goo arts, he could control goo worms with a thought. He could also use goo worms to perform all sorts of strange methods. But now, he could only release these goo worms to help him block the saber beam. The moment the goo worms appeared, Ling Shiqi's blade light also arrived. With an extremely soft sound, all of the goo worms were cut into two halves. Fortunately, these goo worms were carefully cultivated by Sang Hetong, and they helped him block the blade. But his heart was bleeding. These goo worms were not meant to be used like this. However, at this moment, a sharp aura quietly invaded his mind, causing his mental strength to fluctuate. The power was not strong, and it did not hurt his mind, but it shook his mind. Seeing this, Tu Deng's eyes were suddenly filled with splendor. He clearly felt that Ling Shiqi's strike had the feeling of void destruction divine blade. The reason why Ling Shiqi stopped absorbing the power of the blood cocoon and turned to attack Sang Hetong was that he found that although his cultivation was soaring, the spiritual strength in his body was very heterogeneous. Even his fifth level of spirit aperture realm was a little unstable. He knew that one reason was that his cultivation had soared too fast, and the other reason was that the power in the blood cocoon was not pure enough, which led to his unstable foundation. Ling Shiqi made a prompt decision. He no longer coveted a temporary cultivation base and stopped absorbing the blood cocoon's power. But then again, even though he didn't want to absorb it, the energy still kept drilling into his body. Therefore, he had to find a way to release this power. With his current cultivation level, it was enough for him to break free from Sang Hetong's restraints. Thus, he unsheathed his azure rain saber and slashed out with fleeting flash. However, this time was very different from the past. First of all, the power this saber absorbed was not his own power, but the power within the blood cocoon. That was why he didn't use much spirit force. In addition, the moment he swung his blade, he also used the void/divine blade. Unfortunately, he only used a trace of the rhythm of the void/slashing godly blade. However, this accidental combination also allowed Ling Shiqi to see the possibility of the combination of the ephemeral flower and the void-slaying godly blade. If one day in the future, he really managed to fuse the ephemeral flash of the night and the void-slaying godly saber, he would truly be able to slash apart both his physical body and primordial spirit. Visible saber light could be dodged or blocked, but an invisible saber that specialized in slashing the primordial spirit was impossible to defend against. Just like the current Sang Hetong, he was caught off guard. In the instant he was distracted, Ling Shiqi waved his hand and hundreds of golden thread goo crawled towards Sang Hetong. Sang Hetong came back to his senses and found that the golden thread goo had already arrived in front of him. His body shook and he started to struggle, trying to break free from Tu Deng's control. A trace of blood suddenly flowed out from the corner of Tu Deng's mouth, but he still firmly restrained Sang Hetong. He knew that the most critical moment had arrived. Hundreds of golden thread goo crawled onto Sang Hetong's body and broke through his skin, drilling into his body. Sang Hetong immediately screamed. His body was filled with dense spirit energy. However, the golden thread goo fed on the spirit energy of myriad spirit goo devouring technique. Not only were they unharmed, they even grew stronger. Normally, Sang Hetong had many ways to kill these golden silk goo, but unfortunately, he was powerless now and could only watch as the golden silk goo devoured his spirit energy. Soon, Sang Hetong's spirit energy aura began to drop rapidly. He had absorbed everyone's chi and blood and reached the limit of unity of heaven realm, but now he had fallen to the late stage of unity of heaven realm and was still falling. Late stage, middle stage, early stage. It didn't stop until Sang Hetong's cultivation fell to the late stage of spirit astral realm, because all the golden thread goo were saturated and could no longer devour his spirit energy. During this process, Ling Shiqi held the Qinglin saber in his hand. All of his spiritual energy, mental energy, chi, and blood force, as well as his firm will, including the power of the blood cocoons, were mobilized and compressed to the extreme. The Qing Lin saber began to tremble and let out a buzzing sound. Just as the golden thread goose stopped, Ling Shiqi slashed out with the strongest saber he had ever used. At this moment, the entire space seemed to be frozen. A ray of saber light flashed, as if it was going to cut the world in half. Ling Shiqi, who was at the 5th level of Spirit Aperture Realm, condensed all of his strength for a brief moment, and its power was indescribable. Of course, Ling Shiqi didn't have the strength to cut through space, but it was no problem for him to cut a person in half. That person was Sang He Tong. Faced with Ling Shiqi's saber light, which was even stronger than before, he couldn't help but show a horrified expression. Even now, he still had this expression on his face, but his expression had already frozen. Because his body had been completely cut in half from the middle. Strangely, not a single drop of blood flowed out from his body. Instead, there was a stinky and disgusting mucus. Those were the goo worms that he had been raising in his body. With the death of his body, those goo worms also died. At this moment, this person who had toyed with everyone in the palm of his hand was finally filled with hatred. Ding! Ling Shiqi suddenly knelt down and used the Qing Lin saber to support his body. His final move, a brief moment, seemed to have used up all of his strength. However, immediately after, cracks appeared on the Qing Lin saber's body, and it finally shattered with a loud bang. Even a 4th-level spirit tool couldn't withstand the terrifying power of a brief moment. At this moment, in Ling Shiqi's eyes, a green shadow floated above Sang He Tong's body. With a thought, the green shadow entered his body. Immediately, he felt a strange power cleansing his body and increasing his mental strength. This was the power of Sang He Tong's remnant soul. A remnant soul of the unity of heaven realm. This power allowed Ling Shiqi to recover quite a bit. He stood up and walked forward, directly taking off Sang He Tong's mustard seed bracelet. No one objected to this action, because they were still in shock. Chapter 387. Everyone was shocked beyond words when they saw Sang He Tong die. At first, Ling Shiqi stood out, but they didn't have much hope for Ling Shiqi, because Ling Shiqi's cultivation wasn't enough. Although the late stage of Spirit Pulse realm wasn't weak, it was nothing to Sang He Tong, who was in the realm of one with the world. Later, Sang He Tong used the power of blood to pour into Ling Shiqi, wanting to make him explode. Everyone thought that Ling Shiqi was about to die. However, Ling Shiqi continued to absorb the power, and his cultivation soared. He even broke through to the Spirit Aperture realm. This brought a glimmer of hope to the crowd. However, he was still able to control the formation even when his body was under control. In an instant, thousands of people exploded. The rich power of qi and blood formed a blood cocoon around Ling Shiqi. Seeing that Ling Shiqi was about to die, he didn't die. Instead, his cultivation broke through, and he even broke through to the 5th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm. Since when was it so easy to break through to the Spirit Aperture Realm? One had to know that the most difficult part of the Spirit Aperture Realm wasn't cultivating spirit energy, but opening the spirit apertures. They had never heard of anyone who could open dozens of spirit apertures in a few breaths of time. Everything that happened had completely broken everyone's understanding. How could they not be shocked? What surprised them even more was Ling Shiqi's saber. Especially the saber that killed Sang He Tong at the end. That saber caused even the spirit astral realm experts to feel a chill run down their spines. Under the saber, the space was almost frozen. Who could block such a saber technique? Even Sang He Tong couldn't block it and died under the saber. A person in the Spirit Aperture realm had crossed 2 realms and killed Sang He Tong, who was in the realm of one with the world. No one would believe such a thing. Even if it happened right in front of their eyes, they still found it hard to accept. In fact, the biggest contributor to Sang and Tong's death was Tu Deng. Tu Deng restricted 90% of Sang He Tong's strength. In addition, Ling Shiqi made Sang He Tong's cultivation fall to Gang's spirit realm with the help of golden thread venomous insect. Therefore, Sang He Tong was killed when Sang He Tong had no ability to resist. Otherwise, Ling Shiqi would not be able to deal with Sang Yitong's strange gu arts. No matter how amazing Ling Shiqi's slash was, Sang Yitong would be able to easily break it. After Sang and Tong died, the blood sacrifice formation collapsed on its own without anyone controlling it. Everyone was finally able to move freely again. The blood prison that trapped Yu Ruifeng and Prince Gus had also disappeared. The two of them were now skin and bones, and their auras were very weak. It was obvious that they had lost a lot of blood and qi. As for his cultivation, he had fallen to the middle or late stage of Gang's spirit realm. When they came to Ling Shiqi, they all looked at him with gratitude. However, when Prince Gus looked at Tudong, he showed a thoughtful expression. Tudong did not pay attention to them. He was still sitting cross-legged, murmuring to Sang Yitong's body, as if he was reciting some scriptures. At this time, the remaining 2,000 or 3,000 imperial guards and masters all gathered around and asked about Prince Gus's well-being. Prince Heli was dead, so it was conceivable that Prince Gus would be their leader in the future. More importantly, Sang Yitong was also dead, and even Princess Bess was killed in the chaos. It seemed that Prince Gus was the best candidate for the throne. As for Chu Li, the Minister of State Affairs, they did not take him seriously. No matter how great Chu Li's prestige was in the imperial court, he did not have any military power, and his strength was negligible. He was not qualified to compete with Prince Gus for the throne. In this way, Prince Gus could be regarded as the next king, so these people naturally cared more about him. Prince Gus chatted with these people for a while and let them go to plunder the resources of the Gu God sect. Tudong, the former sect leader, did not have the slightest reaction. Prince Gus walked to Ling Shiqi and Yu Ruifeng, clasped his fist and said, "Lord Yu, Lord Lu, it is thanks to you two that we can get rid of Sang Yitong and the Gu God sect. Otherwise, we'll all die here." Ling Shiqi did not expect that he could be called Lord Lu by Prince Gus, so he immediately said a few polite words. As for Yu Ruifeng, after taking a deep look at Ling Shiqi, he began to look around. At this moment, 90% of the people had gone to plunder the resources in groups. Only a few spirit cultivators of the 4 realms of Sky Human were protecting Prince Gus, and there were only 4 Dark Thunder Guards left. Among them was Guan Feihong. Ling Shiqi had noticed that something was wrong long ago. He had called Guan Feihong to the edge of the formation, so he was not affected. However, the other Dark Thunder Guards had suffered heavy losses. Even Yuan Song, the great supervisor of the South region, had died. Yu Ruifeng's expression was gloomy to the extreme. The Dark Thunder Guards had only come to Zhu Lu country to go through the motions, but the king had suddenly died, and they were also swept into this huge vortex. In the end, they fell into Sang Yitong's trap, causing them to lose more than half of their manpower. These people were all carefully nurtured by Yu Ruifeng. How could he not feel heartache? But then again, if it were not for Ling Shiqi and Tudong turning the tide, everyone here would have died. In the end, they all became stepping stones for Sang Yitong to break through to the Sky Yuan realm. It was already good enough to be able to survive. Yu Ruifeng glanced at Ling Shiqi and Tudong. He did not know how Ling Shiqi met the previous sect leader of the Gu God sect, nor did he know why Ling Shiqi had such a strange gu like the golden silk gu. He also did not know what Ling Shiqi had experienced when he left the king's city, but the result was that Ling Shiqi had saved him. Because of this, Yu Ruifeng would not ask Ling Shiqi. He said to Ling Shiqi, "Back then, your master saved me once. Today, you saved me again. I don't know when I will be able to repay the kindness of both of you." Ling Shiqi immediately replied, "Martial uncle, what are you talking about? There is no need to mention repayment between us." Good, good. I, Yu Ruifeng, will recognize you as my nephew." Yu Ruifeng patted Ling Shiqi's shoulder and laughed. Prince Gus looked at Yu Ruifeng. He also found that there were only 6 Dark Thunder Guards left, including Yu Ruifeng and Ling Shiqi. How should he explain this to the Dark Thunder Guards? How should he explain to the Thunder Flame dynasty? Unknowingly, Prince Gus had put himself in the shoes of a king. Prince Gus walked over with a solemn expression. Yu Ruifeng knew what he was thinking with a glance. Prince Gus, I can report this matter to the Thunder Flame Dynasty. However, I want 50% of the Gu God Sect's cultivation resources and I want priority in choosing them. Upon hearing this, Prince Gus felt relieved. If Yu Ruifeng had reported the truth, then all the blame would have been pushed onto the dead Sang Hetong. However, he soon felt a wave of heartache. Yu Ruifeng wanted 50% of the Gu God Sect's cultivation resources. This was an exorbitant demand. The Gu God Sect was not only a first-rate faction, but also the national religion of the Zhu Lu country. Who knew how much wealth they had accumulated over the years? However, Prince Gus agreed without any hesitation. As long as he could spend money, he was naturally willing. Chapter 388. Ling Shiqi could understand Yu Ruifeng's need for resources. Because Sang Hetong had drained a large amount of qi, blood, and spirit energy, Yu Ruifeng's qi and blood loss was very serious, and his spirit energy cultivation had also dropped by a large realm. Therefore, he naturally needed a large amount of resources to recover his cultivation as soon as possible. After receiving an answer from Yu Ruifeng, Prince Gus brought people to inspect the resources, so as to prevent people from filling their pockets. Yu Ruifeng began to adjust his breathing under the protection of several dark lightning guards. At this time, Tu Deng sighed slightly. Ling Shiqi stepped forward and bowed, "Many thanks to Senior for saving my life." Tu Deng didn't care about this matter. He sighed, this old man seems to have seen his past self in Sang Hetong, and also seems to have seen another version of himself. At that time, if Sang Hetong hadn't imprisoned this old man, perhaps one day this old man would have done such an intolerable thing. Power is really too tempting. Sang Hetong was completely addicted to the pursuit of power, and even this old man almost fell for it. Little friend Lu was able to take the initiative to stop absorbing the power of the blood cocoon to increase his cultivation. This old man admires you for having such a strong will. Ling Shiqi modestly said, "Senior is too kind. This old man isn't overpraising you. Little friend Lu has the potential to become a supreme expert. If he doesn't die young, he will definitely become a powerful expert in the future." Now that this matter is over, the Gu God sect that this old man created has been completely destroyed. This old man's heart can be considered to have no more worries. From now on, this old man will save the dying and heal the injured with this ruined body of mine. This can more or less make up for the sins this old man committed in the past. After saying this, Tu Deng turned around to leave. "Senior, wait." Ling Shiqi stopped him and quickly stepped forward to take out a mustard seed bag. "This is?" Ling Shiqi said with a smile, "Senior will know when you see it." Tu Deng's spirit entered the mustard seed bag. Then, even though he had experienced a lot and his will was as firm as a mountain, at this time, he revealed an expression of shock, joy, and eagerness. The mustard seed bag contained the other 8 sets of scriptures. There were hundreds of scriptures. "Little friend Lu, what are you doing?" Ling Shiqi said seriously, "Senior, to be honest, I came across these books by accident. They don't seem to be products of the Falling Star continent." Junior is slow-witted because he was unable to comprehend the profoundness within. As the saying goes, treasured swords are given to heroes. I will give these to Senior. Tudeng, to be precise, it should be Tudeng's kindness, was the only person Ling Shiqi had seen since he came to this world who was suitable for these sutras. Rather than leaving it here to collect dust, he might as well gift it to Tu Deng. This was his sincere offer. Of course, it would be best if he could do her a favor. Tu Deng viewed these scriptures as treasures, but he still shook his head and said, "I can't take your things for free. It's a pity that I don't have anything valuable on me. How about this, I can promise you 3 things." As he spoke, he took out 3 emerald green jade beads and said, "This old man will still be in Zhu Lu country in the next few years. Little friend, if you come with this token, this old man can do 3 things for little friend, as long as you don't go against this old man's wishes." Ling Shiqi's heart shook and he was pleasantly surprised. He originally thought that it would be fine as long as he could do a favor, but he didn't expect Tuding to be so generous. This was equivalent to him being able to use a Unity of Heaven expert 3 times. This gave Leng Shiqi a lot more confidence. Leng Shiqi also knew that since Tuding said this, he wouldn't take it back. He didn't stand on ceremony and directly took the 3 jade beads and carefully put them away. Seeing this, Tuding revealed a smile. Leng Shiqi suddenly thought of something and immediately asked, "Senior, what is the origin of this formation that Sang Hetong used?" To be honest, this junior has seen a similar formation in a secret realm before. Tuding heard this and immediately frowned. This old man actually doesn't know much about this formation. This formation is an ancient book that this old man obtained by chance when he was young and traveling. I have never paid too much attention to it. A few decades ago, Sang Hetong suddenly discovered this thing and was very obsessed with it. This old man was afraid that he would go astray, so I destroyed the ancient book that recorded the formation. I didn't think that Sang Hetong would be able to deduce the complete formation from a few words. If he put all his effort into comprehending the power of heaven and earth, he might be able to rely on his own strength to break through to the heaven origin realm. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi nodded. 10,000 years ago, Meng Tianzong had also killed over 10,000 disciples of the Divine Illusion Palace in order to break through. Meng Tianzong and Sang Hetong's methods were almost the same, so Leng Shiqi thought that there was some connection between the two. It seemed that everything was just a coincidence. So that's how it is. Little friend, if there is nothing else, this old man will take his leave. Farewell, senior. Tuding said and left. He didn't even look at the Gu God Peak from start to finish. Leng Shiqi looked around and saw that there was nothing else for him to do. Thus, he walked to Yu Ruifeng's side and closed his eyes to adjust his breathing. Now that too many accidents had occurred in the process of his breakthrough, he needed to sort them out properly. First, he was more concerned about the strange realm between the Spirit Pulse realm and the Spirit Aperture realm. He called it the Spirit Pulse realm level 10. When he was at the Spirit Pulse realm level 10, a door appeared in his spirit sea. That door helped him absorb a huge amount of blood qi. Otherwise, he would have exploded before he could break through to the Spirit Aperture realm. But what was that door? Leng Shiqi didn't know. He had never heard of such a situation in the many cultivation methods he cultivated. He could only look through ancient books to find out. If he couldn't, he could ask Wu Xiang. Other than that, what Leng Shiqi was more concerned about were the strange memories that suddenly appeared in his mind. The fall of gods and devils, the collapse of heaven and earth, mountains of corpses and seas of bones, and the last thing that appeared was the Dark Shadow clan. Although Leng Shiqi didn't see the changes in himself at that time, he could feel a cold mark on his forehead. That mark also helped him absorb a lot of blood qi. Therefore, the Dark Shadow clan became a target for him to investigate in the future. However, whether it was that door or the mysterious Dark Shadow clan, they were far less important than another thing, and that was the system. After Leng Shiqi erased the system's consciousness, he didn't have time to check the system's changes. He immediately opened the system. The interface didn't change much. First was his personal information, name, Leng Shiqi, Lu Xingji, cultivation, Spirit Aperture Realm Level 5 status, insufficient spiritual power bloodline, Dark Shadow clan, unknown management authority, 37% cultivation method, Cold Underworld Treasure Golden Mystic Young Art 5 God Flowing Light Art 1000 Turns Fantasy World Art 10,000 Goose Spirit Devouring Technique Spiritual Skills, Rank 5 Spiritual Skill Golden Mountain Breaking Seal Rank 5 Spiritual Skill Bright Sun, Mystic Young Palm Rank 5 Spiritual Skill Cold Underworld Palm Rank 5 Spiritual Skill Cold Underworld Palm Secret Technique Void Slashing God Destroying Blade System Coins, 1382. The biggest changes in his information were his bloodline and management authority. The bloodline showed that he had the bloodline of the Dark Shadow clan. Moreover, he had another unknown bloodline. However, other than that strange scene, Leng Shiqi's body didn't change at all. Then what was the use of this bloodline? He frowned and thought for a while, but couldn't figure it out. He simply stopped thinking about it and focused on the management authority. Especially when there was a 37% after these 4 words. Does this mean that I have 37% of the management authority in the system? But, how do I use this authority? Then he opened the system inventory. Everything was normal. He then opened the map system. The 4 words that entered his eyes made his whole body tremble. Map fully opened. 10,000 system coins will be used. Fully opened? Leng Shiqi stared at these words, afraid that his eyes were playing tricks on him. The system map was a very useful thing. Not only could he observe the terrain, but he could also use the fate skill to teleport. However, the system map had a huge flaw. That was that Leng Shiqi had to open the map himself. If he could open the map fully, this flaw would be completely solved. Leng Shiqi felt that the 10,000 system coins would be worth it. Unfortunately, he didn't have that many system coins right now. This matter would have to be delayed for a while. Then he opened the system store. There were still only 4 items in the system store. However, a refresh button appeared at the bottom right corner. He looked at the description and learned that he had 3 chances to refresh the system store every day. The biggest drawback of the system store was that it was too random. Now that he had 3 more chances to refresh, it was quite good. Finally, when Leng Shiqi was about to exit the system store, a line of words popped up on the interface: the system is about to be upgraded. It will take 30 natural days. The system will not be able to be used during the upgrade. Upgrade? Leng Shiqi was no stranger to this message. Every time he broke through a realm, the system would be upgraded. He was already used to it. He first transferred the things he used frequently to the mustard seed bracelet and chose yes. However, to his surprise, another message appeared. Administrator, Host 01 has requested to upgrade the system. Do you agree? Leng Shiqi's heart skipped a beat as he stared at the line of words. After a while, he said, yes. System upgrade commencing. Progress 0.001%. Chapter 389. Leng Shiqi felt like he was cheating when he saw the changes in the system map and the system store. But the last request of the system made him feel that he had the authority of a manager. At the same time, he was looking forward to the upgrade of the system. Now that he had a lot of administrative authority, he would be able to use more authority after the upgrade of the system. In the end, Leng Shiqi began to study the 5-god flowing light formula. After he reached the spirit aperture realm, the second level of the 5-god flowing light formula appeared, which was enough for him to reach the gang spirit realm. Besides, there were 2 new spiritual techniques. They were the 5-god intimidating spell and the light rotation formation, both of which were at the 5th level. The 5-god intimidating spell was the upgraded version of the intimidating spell he had practiced before. It used the body of a god to enter the enemy's consciousness and intimidate the enemy's mind. Every time the 5-god intimidating spell was upgraded, 1 more god's shadow would appear. When the spell was completed, it could produce 5 gods' shadows. The light rotation formation was an offensive spiritual technique, which could be summoned behind the user to activate the light rotation formation, which was very powerful. Leng Shiqi didn't choose to upgrade the 2 spiritual techniques with unlimited skill points. Instead, he decided to practice them with his own strength. First of all, when he was fighting with the system's consciousness, Leng Shiqi knew that he didn't have enough means. In particular, the system's words before it died made him feel a little uneasy. The system's consciousness might appear again in the future, so he had to be careful. Second of all, Leng Shiqi was born with a great talent for the 5-god flowing light formula. When he was in the Phantom Spirit's secret realm, it only took him 2 hours to reach the 1st level. Therefore, Leng Shiqi decided to practice the 2 spiritual techniques by himself. Now that he had some time, he began to understand the mnemonics. In the afternoon, Prince Gus came. Lord Yu, the resources of the Gu God sect have been sorted out. Yu Ruifeng stood up and took Leng Shiqi and the rest of the Dark Thunder Guards to the Gu God Temple of the Gu God sect. At this time, all the resources of the Gu God sect were piled up in different categories. Looking around, it actually filled up half of the hall. The Gu God sect was a first-rate power, and it was also the national religion of Zhu Lu country. Not only did it have a lot of resources, but they were also very precious. Leng Shiqi secretly swallowed his saliva. Prince Gus said, "Lord Yu, according to our previous agreement, you can take a limited 50% of the resources here." Losing half of the resources really made Prince Gus' heart ache, but compared to the throne, compared to the stability of Zhu Lu country, it was nothing. However, Yu Ruifeng turned to Leng Shiqi and said, "Nephew, you can have 10% of my 50%. You can choose first." Both Leng Shiqi and Prince Gus were stunned when they heard this. Prince Gus didn't expect Yu Ruifeng to be so generous. However, since Leng Shiqi had saved their lives, he didn't feel ashamed to receive 10% of the resources. Leng Shiqi was also a little surprised because he had already taken Sang Yitong's mustard seed bracelet. The collection of the leader of the Gu God sect was priceless. He was also very satisfied. Of course, he would definitely take the resources that were sent to his door. The reason why Yu Ruifeng did this was nothing more than to get closer to him. Today, Leng Shiqi saved him and showed his incomparable terrifying talent. He was also favored by Eunuch Gao, one of the Dark Thunder Guards. His future was limitless. It was obviously a wise choice to give him benefits and investment when his cultivation was not high and his reputation was not well known. Therefore, Leng Shiqi politely said a few words and began to choose. First of all, what he needed most was a suitable spiritual sword. Because the Green Rain sword could not withstand the power of the short-lived flash in the pan, he urgently needed a 5th level or even better spiritual sword. Leng Shiqi went straight to the area where the spiritual weapons were piled. He looked around and found that the highest level of spiritual weapon was only 6th level. 6th level spiritual weapons were unattainable for ordinary spirit cultivators. Generally, only the masters of the Gang's spirit realm were qualified to have them. But for a first-class sect like the Gu God sect, it was a bit shabby. Leng Shiqi thought about it. The Gu God sect focused on the cultivation of the Gu God sect, and their disciples rarely used spiritual weapons, so he was relieved. He kept looking around and soon fixed his eyes on a spiritual sword. The sword was pitch black, about the same length as the Green Rain sword, but the blade was wider. There were small saw teeth on the back of the sword, which looked very ferocious. The whole sword gave people a feeling of fierceness. Most importantly, even if the sword was not moved, it would faintly emit a faint demonic chi. Obviously, it was a demonic sword. 6th level demonic sword, demon arrival battle sword. Leng Shiqi was immediately attracted by the demon arrival battle sword. He reached out to hold the sword, and the demon arrival battle sword trembled violently, as if it wanted to break free from his hand. Leng Shiqi was surprised and happy. The sword seemed to have a trace of spirituality. As far as he knew, among the spiritual weapons, those below the 7th level were called spiritual weapons, and those below the 7th level were called treasured weapons. Because the 7th level treasured weapons had a certain degree of spirituality, they could be more compatible with the user's cultivation method and spiritual skills, and their power would be multiplied. The demon arrival battle sword was at the 6th level, but it had a trace of spirituality, which meant that it was very close to the 7th level. Leng Shiqi snorted softly, and the vigorous spiritual power in his body operated, instantly making the demon arrival battle sword behave. Then, he did not put the sword into the mustard seed bracelet, but carried it on his back, nourishing it with his aura. With the addition of the 6th level demonic sword, not only did it replace the Azure Rain sword, but it also increased Leng Shiqi's strength by another level. He patted the demon arrival battle sword with satisfaction, and continued to choose from the pile of spiritual weapons. After all, spiritual weapons were the most direct things to increase one's battle strength. Next, he chose the level 5 spirit tools, the sharp peak spear and the profound ice bow. In this way, his most commonly used weapons were greatly strengthened. After choosing the spiritual weapons, Leng Shiqi's next target was materials. In the past, Leng Shiqi did not like to collect materials, and almost all of them were sold to the system. But now that he was in the spirit aperture realm, it was different. The most important resource in the spirit aperture realm was the awakening pill. Although Ling Shiqi had already opened 81 spiritual apertures, this was not his limit, so he needed a large amount of awakening pills. And in the illusory spirit realm, he had obtained the recipe for the awakening pill, so now he needed to collect a large amount of materials to refine the awakening pill. After a while, Ling Shiqi filled 2 mustard seed bags with materials. He estimated that his 10% should be enough, so he prepared to stop. But at this time, he took a fancy to another item. Chapter 390. That thing was called the Scarlet Blood Jade. It was a heavenly treasure that was used to strengthen the body. It was rank 6. After Ling Shiqi absorbed a large amount of blood essence and Sang Hetong's soul, his body was stuck between the late stage of the spirit transformation realm and the spirit vein realm. If he were to slowly refine it, it would take a long time, so he coveted the Scarlet Blood Jade. Ling Shiqi silently took the Scarlet Blood Jade, and Yu Ruifeng didn't say anything. At this point, there was nothing else he wanted. There were no cultivation methods or spirit techniques here because all of the Gu God sect's cultivation methods were stored in another pavilion. Unfortunately, the pavilion suddenly collapsed after Sang Yitong's death. It seemed that Sang Yitong had done something to the inside. However, Ling Shiqi didn't lack cultivation methods or spirit techniques. Not to mention, the most profound cultivation method of the Gu God sect, the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring art, was on him. It was even more complete than the one Sang Hetong had. Next, it was Yu Ruifeng's turn to choose his 40%. What Yu Ruifeng chose were basically all elixirs that were used to replenish his qi, blood, and spiritual energy. After he finished choosing, the group packed up and left the Gu God Peak to return to the king's city. Ling Shiqi suddenly thought of someone who had never shown up before. It was Princess Carol. Ling Shiqi remembered that after he lured out the experts of the Gu God sect, Princess Carol had never appeared. Logically speaking, she was an expert at the spirit aperture realm, and her battle prowess was not weak. However, she had never shown her face from beginning to end. He didn't know where Princess Carol had run off to, but now that the situation was set, she couldn't do anything by herself. When everyone reached the mountainside, Ling Shiqi suddenly stopped in his tracks, as if he had thought of something. He said to Yu Ruifeng, "Lord Yu, I remember that there are a few Gu worm caves nearby. I want to take some back to study." Yu Ruifeng agreed without hesitation. "It's okay. Go ahead." "Thank you, Lord," Ling Shiqi said and left the group, rushing towards the Gu worm cave. When Ling Shiqi was at the spirit vein realm, he could only raise 1,000 Gu worms, and most of them were golden silk Gu. The golden silk Gu was used to counter the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring art. But now, there were only 3 people who cultivated the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring art. They were himself, Tu Deng, and Princess Carol. Thus, the golden silk Gu's effect was greatly reduced. In addition, Ling Shiqi reached the 5th layer of the spirit aperture realm and could raise 2,000 Gu worms. Thus, he came here to replenish his Gu worms. Fortunately, the Imperial Guards did not destroy these Gu worm caves. Because these caves contained countless Gu worms, it was quite troublesome to begin with. Moreover, if no one nurtured and raised them, these Gu worms would die in a short period of time. Thus, the Imperial Guards did not pay attention to the Gu worm cave. Ling Shiqi immediately activated the myriad Gu spirit devouring technique and entered one of the Gu worm caves. He habitually activated his supercilious eyes to prevent anyone from coming over. But he immediately sensed Princess Carol's aura not far from him. At this moment, Ling Shiqi finally understood. It turned out that Princess Carol had been hiding in this Gu worm cave. These countless Gu worms had completely isolated her aura. No wonder no one had discovered her. However, regardless of whether she was here to collect Gu worms or to avoid disaster, Ling Shiqi still had a debt to settle with her. Princess Ka Lua was currently in another Gu worm cave. She was concentrating on forming hand seals. In front of her, numerous Gu worms were devouring each other. But right at this moment, a familiar voice resounded. Princess Carol, you have truly harmed me. Hearing this voice, Princess Carol's body trembled. She almost lost control of the seals in her hands. This voice came from Ling Shiqi, who was disguised as Zhuqiu. To Princess Carol, the appearance of this voice was completely out of her expectations. In fact, when she saw Ling Shiqi enter Gu God Peak, she sneaked into Gu God Peak from another direction. Later, Ling Shiqi really lured all the experts of the 4 realms of human and heaven, and Princess Carol secretly came to the Gu Cave. She did not forget her original purpose, which was to find a way to detoxify the princess. Not long after she entered the Gu Cave, she sensed that the Gu Gods sect had activated the sect protecting formation. She knew that the princess, the main combat faction, and the Dark Thunder Guards had definitely come to fight. But Princess Carol did not come out because she also felt that their side would definitely win. But later, there were waves of spirit energy fluctuations that made her heart palpitate from the peak, making her feel uneasy. Unfortunately, even if she went out, she could not change the situation of the battle. It was better to continue refining Gu here and detoxify the princess. At this moment, Ling Shiqi suddenly appeared here. He clearly did not come in, but he could call out her name. This made her feel incredulous. But what was even more incredulous was that Ling Shiqi actually walked into the Gu Cave. He walked to Princess Carol's side. Princess Carol looked at Ling Shiqi in shock. Not just anyone could enter the Gu Worm Cave. One had to have a high level of Gu techniques to enter. Otherwise, one would definitely be eaten to death by 50 Gu worms. But when she saw that Ling Shiqi's body was surging with green light that was of the same origin as hers, she was even more shocked. She exclaimed, 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique? How can you know the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique? Ling Shiqi said coldly, Princess Carol, you're really forgetful. Could it be that you've forgotten that you've spread this cultivation technique in Misty Chi City? Also, shouldn't I be the one asking the questions? Princess Carol's expression froze. She recalled that she had indeed passed on the first 2 levels of the Myriad Gu spirit devouring technique back then. They were all from the same organization, so it made sense that this Zhuqiu would obtain the cultivation technique. However, the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique was not an ordinary technique. This kind of Gu technique was very difficult to cultivate without guidance. But now, not only did he cultivate it, but he could also use it freely. This alone was shocking enough. What made her even more puzzled and surprised was that Zhuqiu cultivated an extremely vicious technique with heavy Yin energy. But now, he could actually use the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique? He could actually cultivate 2 techniques at the same time? Ling Shiqi ignored Princess Carol's shocked expression and said, Your Highness, you said before that if I helped you lure away the experts of the Gu Gods sect, you would give me the mind-controlling Gu. But you suddenly disappeared. It really took me a while to find you. Chapter 391. Ling Shiqi didn't give Princess Carol any face. He said sternly, Princess Carol, I will ask you one question. I risked my life to help you lure out the experts of the Gu God sect and fulfilled my promise. Will you give me the mind-controlling insect or not? Speaking of this, the spirit energy in his body circulated rapidly, emitting the aura of the 5th level of the spirit aperture realm. Moreover, it contained traces of killing intent. Princess Carol's expression suddenly changed, 5th level of the spirit aperture realm. You were hiding your cultivation before. This is my true strength, so Princess Carol, don't think you can get away by luck. With your cultivation at the 2nd level of the spirit aperture realm, you can't escape from me. Of course, if you hand over the mind-controlling insect, I can let bygones be bygones. Ling Shiqi followed Princess Carol's words and said coldly. Princess Carol's face became pale. To tell you the truth, I don't have the mind-controlling insect on me. Are you playing with me? Ling Shiqi's eyes released a ferocious killing intent. Don't worry, Your Excellency. Right now, we have something 100 times more precious than the mind-controlling insect in front of us. Ling Shiqi couldn't help but be a little surprised. Oh? What is it? The Goo King. Princess Carol opened her mouth and said these two words. Ling Shiqi looked at the goo worms that were still fighting and devouring each other. They were very similar to the people on the Blood Mist Island. Princess Carol explained, if I'm not wrong, the Goo God's sect should have been destroyed by the two princes and my mother. These goo worms in the cave naturally became ownerless. I once comprehended the secret method of an ancient secret scroll by chance and learned the method to cultivate the Goo King. If everything goes well, we can use these goo worms in the cave to cultivate an unprecedented Goo King. At that time, I only need to use it to detoxify my mother, and then the Goo King will belong to your excellency. Ling Shiqi was very interested when he heard about the Goo King. These goo worms would self-destruct after a while, so using them to cultivate the Goo King could be considered making the best use of them. However, from Princess Carol's words, it seemed that she didn't know the truth of what happened at the summit, nor did she know that Bess was actually dead. But Ling Shiqi didn't expose her. He asked, how can I trust your highness? I dare not flatter your highness's credibility. Princess Carol solemnly said, I won't joke around with my mother's life. Besides, my life is in your hands, so what are you worried about? Ling Shiqi shook his head, no matter what Princess Carol says, I won't believe you unless you let me plant a goo worm in your body. Planting goo? Princess Carol snickered inwardly. She had the 10,000 goo spirit devouring art, so how could she be afraid of goo worms? But when Ling Shiqi took out a few golden thread goo, Princess Ka Luo's expression showed some panic. Why do you have the golden silk goo? No, you have also cultivated the 10,000 goo devouring spirit technique, so how can you control the golden silk goo? Ling Shiqi frowned, Your Highness has too many questions. If you want me to believe you, plant the golden silk goo. If your highness goes back on her words, half of your cultivation will be crippled. You. Then how can I trust you to take out the golden silk goo? Humph. Ling Shiqi coldly snorted, it seems that your highness hasn't realized the current situation. You only have two choices. Plant the golden silk goo and give the Goo King to me. I will naturally remove the golden silk goo for you. Or die. Princess Carol's body trembled with anger, but she had no other choice. For her own life and her mother's life, she nodded. Very good. Ling Shiqi stretched out his hand, and several golden silk goo landed on Princess Carol's arm and drilled into her skin. Princess Carol didn't resist at all. Ling Shiqi smiled with satisfaction, Your Highness is truly sensible. How long will it take to nurture the Goo King? Princess Carol suppressed her anger, but she didn't show it, replying, nurturing the Goo King is easier said than done. Although there are countless goo worms to use, it will take at least 5 days. Moreover, it might not succeed. Ling Shiqi thought to himself, 5 days, I can accept it. After Prince Gusi inherits the throne, I will have to hold her accountable for this, which will take a few days. Thus, he said, fine, but I believe that Princess Carol will succeed. I will come back in 5 days, I hope Princess Carol won't do anything stupid during this time. Saying so, he directly left the goo worm cave and set up a lightning destruction formation and golden silk goo near several goo worm caves. If Princess Carol dared to escape, her fate would be miserable. Afterwards, he didn't leave in a hurry, but went to another goo worm cave and picked over 1,000 goo worms. Even if he could obtain the Goo King in the future, these goo worms had their own uses, it would be a waste if he didn't take them. On the other side, Prince Gusi ignored his injuries and led the Imperial Guards at full speed, using only half a day to rush back to King City. The reason why he was so anxious was because Sang and Tong had said that if he succeeded in killing everyone and breaking through to Heaven Origin stage, he would help Elder Chuli ascend the throne. Therefore, Sang and Tong might have left something in King City, and Prince Gusi had to hurry back to deal with it. Sure enough, when they rushed back to King City, the whole place was solemn, and there were ceremonial guards erected everywhere. It was clearly a ceremony for a new king to ascend the throne. Prince Gusi pulled over a guard and asked, "What's going on?" The guard trembled. Lord Elder Chu Li is preparing to ascend the throne. Impudent. What right does he have to ascend the throne? Who gave him the courage? Prince Gusi already had a guess, but when he heard the answer, he couldn't help but be furious. He finally understood that Sang and Tong had already made all the arrangements. If everything went according to Sang and Tong's plan, Sang and Tong would have succeeded, and Chu Li would have the qualifications to ascend the throne. However, he, Prince Gusi, was now back. Next, Prince Gusi led a group of Heaven Origin stage experts and 2,000 imperial guards into King City. At this time, in the main hall of King City, Elder Chu Li was dressed in king's attire, bowing in front of an old man. The old man was holding a crown in his hand, and his expression was solemn and solemn. Chu Li was in the middle of being crowned. Previously, he claimed that the two princes had given up the fight for the throne, and their whereabouts were unknown. Then, he stood his ground and forcefully held the coronation ceremony. There were also many people who went to look for the two princes, and even the princess consort, but there was no news, and they could only let Chu Li do as he wished. However, just as the crown was about to be placed on Chu Li's head, a guard ran in a panic. Prince Gusi has brought the imperial guards in. Chu Li was shocked, and his body fell to the ground, and the crown fell to the ground with a ding sound. Chapter 392. After Leng Shiqi returned to the post house, he began to count Sang He's mustard seed bracelet. Previously, there were too many people outside, so it was not convenient for him to count. When he opened Sang He's mustard seed bracelet, he found that most of them were spirit stones, and they were not ordinary spirit stones, they were almost all middle-grade spirit stones. Leng Shiqi used his mental power to detect that there were more than 1,000 middle-grade spirit stones. If converted to ordinary spirit stones, it was equivalent to about 100,000 spirit stones. Suddenly receiving such a huge amount of money, even Leng Shiqi felt a little smug. He did not expect Sang Yitong to be so rich. Of course, now it was Leng Shiqi who was rich. With enough spirit stones, he would be able to use the yin and yang spirit convergence array to cultivate without fear. In addition to the spirit stones, there were countless high-grade resources in the mustard seed bracelet, but most of them were useless to him, so he prepared to give them to Nine Leave. Among the remaining items, Leng Shiqi was most happy with a ring called the Gu God Ring. This was the ring that Sang Yitong personally wore. It was a grade 7 ring. This Gu God Ring was also a spiritual tool, more accurately, it was a treasure tool. The Gu God Ring's greatest use was to allow the Gu God devouring technique to be used to the extreme, and it could greatly increase the power of mental power and spiritual skills. Leng Shiqi had secretly tested it before, and with the support of the divine Gu Ring, the power of his spiritual skills had increased by several folds. In addition to the Gu God Ring, there were also many spiritual tools. Leng Shiqi kept a few of these things as spares, and prepared to sell the rest to the system to open the map. The most unique among them were the cultivation methods and experiences of various Gu worms. These were the personal possessions of Sang Yitong, the leader of the Gu God sect, and their value was immeasurable. Unfortunately, the Gu God sect had been destroyed, and there were not many people in Zhu Lu who were proficient in Gu techniques, so these things were somewhat useless. However, Leng Shiqi suddenly had an idea and murmured, "These things may be very useful." When he was almost done, he closed his eyes and began to cultivate. Leng Shiqi's cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, but at the same time, his foundation was somewhat unstable. He urgently needed to consolidate it. In addition, he also had many advanced spiritual skills, and it was time for him to deduce and integrate them. Thus, he used the soul-splitting technique to split his consciousness into two halves. While consolidating his cultivation, he also deduced his spiritual technique. 3 days later, Prince Gus held his coronation ceremony. Elder Chu Li, on the other hand, was placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. Prince Gus wanted to kill him, but Chu Li's foundation in the imperial court was too deep. Rashly killing him would cause him to lose the support of the people, so he could only remove him from his post and place him under house arrest. Yu Ruifeng, as the special envoy of the Thunderfire dynasty, also went to participate. Leng Shiqi did not go as he needed to settle down and could not afford to waste any time. Prince Gus, or more precisely, King Gus, reorganized the imperial court in the next few days. Those who should be eliminated were eliminated, and those who should be promoted were promoted. The entire imperial city had changed. However, this had nothing to do with Leng Shiqi. On the 5th day, he activated the Fate skill. At this time, he was pleasantly surprised to find that the furthest distance he could teleport had expanded from 300 miles to 500 miles. Then he directly teleported to the mountainside of the Goo God Peak. As soon as he appeared, he first checked the Thunder Destruction Array and the golden silk goo that had been set up before. After finding that they were all normal, he felt relieved. Leng Shiqi opened his eyes and immediately found Princess Carol's position. However, her current state did not seem to be very good. The spiritual force in her body was almost exhausted. Beside her, there was a very weak spiritual force aura, which was probably equivalent to a spirit cultivator in the pure spirit realm. Leng Shiqi came to Princess Carol's side. Her face was pale as she maintained a seal, controlling a fingernail-sized, mottled goo worm in front of her. This goo worm was struggling with all its might. Seeing Leng Shiqi appear, she hurriedly said, "Zhuoqiu, you're finally here. Give me some pills to recover my spiritual force." Leng Shiqi's eyes flashed and he handed over a spirit overflowing pill. This was the most suitable pill for Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators to recover their spiritual force. Princess Carol also showed a trace of surprise. She opened her mouth and swallowed the pill. Her face also had a touch of red. After a long while, the strange goo worm finally settled down and finally drilled into Princess Carol's body. Princess Carol took a deep breath and said, "Fortunately, you came. Otherwise, all my efforts would have been for naught." Leng Shiqi also saw that Princess Carol was almost unable to collect the goo worm due to insufficient spiritual force. However, he was puzzled. Was that weak-looking goo worm the legendary Goo King? So he asked, "Princess Carol, did you successfully cultivate the Goo King?" "Yes." Princess Ka Luo replied, "This Goo King is the one that survived after countless goo worms killed and devoured each other in several goo worm caves. I used an ancient secret method to refine it and finally succeeded. However, the Goo King has just been born and is still very weak. It still needs to devour many rare resources to continue evolving." "I see." Leng Shiqi was also a bit surprised. The Goo King born from so many goo worms was actually so weak. As if sensing Leng Shiqi's thoughts, Princess Carol said with a serious expression, "Zhuoqiu, don't underestimate the Goo King. Even if it's very weak now, it still has the ability to restrain all goo in the world. After I use it to absorb the goo poison in my mother's body, I will give it to you." Leng Shiqi was silent for a moment. "I don't think there is a need to go through so much trouble." Princess Carol immediately became vigilant. She said solemnly, "Are you going back on your words?" "No." Leng Shiqi shook his head. He stretched out his hand and took out the gold thread goo that was hidden in Princess Carol's body. Princess Carol's heart calmed down a bit, but she did not relax her vigilance. Leng Shiqi said, "There is something you might not know." Next, he told Princess Carol everything that happened on the peak of Gushan Peak. He described it from the perspective of an ordinary person. He did not hide anything. She only needed to ask around and she would know. However, when Princess Carol learned that Bess had died an unnatural death and Gus had succeeded the throne, her mind went blank. It was as if her sky had collapsed. In fact, it was true. Her parents were the king and his wife, and she was the princess who was loved by everyone. But in just a few days, she lost her parents and her noble status. In fact, as long as she dared to show herself, Gus would send people to kill her to prevent future troubles. Her sky had indeed collapsed. Pfft! Princess Carol could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. These days, she had been cultivating the Goo King with all her might. Her goal was to detoxify Princess Beth, this was her belief. However, this belief had already collapsed. It turned out that everything she did was useless. Princess Carol said in a mournful voice, "You already knew, didn't you?" Leng Shiqi did not speak. "Yes, you just wanted the Gu King. If you had told me earlier, I would not have cultivated the Gu King." "Ridiculous, it turns out I was a chess piece in someone else's hands from beginning to end, being used all along." Her voice became softer and softer. Leng Shiqi could even feel a trace of desire to die from her. However, Leng Shiqi said to her, "Do you want to take revenge?" Princess Carol abruptly raised her head and glared at him, her eyes filled with boundless hatred. Chapter 393. Seeing the hatred in Princess Carol's eyes, Leng Shiqi knew she no longer had the will to die. He said, "Actually, you should know that if you and Princess Consort interfered in the fight for the throne, you would likely end up like this." Even if Sang Hetong did not kill Princess Consort, she would have died at Gus' hands sooner or later. "You should be glad you hid in this goo worm cave, otherwise, you would have died long ago." Princess Carol knew Leng Shiqi was speaking the truth, but she did not want to hear it now. She said darkly, "What do you want to say? Have you ever thought about why Princess Consort interfered in the fight for the throne? Why do you think she chose to work with the pro-war faction after knowing she was poisoned? This is like asking a tiger for its skin, but she still did it." Leng Shiqi looked into Princess Carol's eyes and continued, "She did it for you. If I am not wrong, Princess Consort's original intention is for the pro-war faction and the pro-peace faction to both suffer losses, and she will benefit from it. If her plan succeeds, do you think it will be her or you who will sit on the throne?" Princess Carol bit her lips, her shoulders starting to tremble. Every word Leng Shiqi said seemed to stab at the weakest part of her heart. But Leng Shiqi did not stop. "Therefore, only by ascending to the throne of Zhu Lu country can you truly inherit the will of the king and Princess Consort, you can truly take revenge for them. And I can help you." Haha. Princess Carol laughed bitterly, "Throne? I am alone right now, I have nothing, how can I ascend to the throne? It is simply a fantasy. You cannot do it now, but that does not mean you cannot do it in the future. You can take a look at this first." Saying this, Leng Shiqi took out a mustard seed bag and threw it over. Princess Carol subconsciously caught it and opened the mustard seed bag to take a look. Her pupils shrunk as she showed a shocked expression. This mustard seed bag contained all of Sang Hetong's Gu refinement techniques. There was even the next level of the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring method. Princess Carol knew how precious these things were, but she was even more shocked. How did he obtain them? Leng Shiqi stood with his hands behind his back. He did not explain, but said, "Your Highness, there are some spirit cultivators who cultivate Gu techniques in Zhu Lu country. With your talent and the support of these resources, you can establish your own sect. Furthermore, with your means, you can hide your identity and take up an official position in Monarch City. This way, you'll have some followers both inside and outside the city. Of course, this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you are a princess and have the right to inherit the throne. When the time is right, you will have the opportunity to overthrow Gus." Princess Carol's eyes flickered with uncertainty. It did sound possible, but she shook her head and said, "Even if that's the case, I'm afraid the possibility is less than half. I'm digging my own grave by doing this." "Of course, that's not all." Leng Shiqi smiled strangely and said, "There is also a highly respected old official in Monarch City who has pledged allegiance to us. Although he is under house arrest now, the foundation behind him is still very deep. When the time comes, he will be a great help to you." Although Princess Carol had not come into contact with the outside world, from Leng Shiqi's words, she could guess who that person was. It must be the previous elder, Chu Li. She could not help but be surprised. The other party could actually rope in Chu Li. How many unimaginable methods did they have? In addition, we also have great experts in the Unity of Heaven realm. You don't have to worry about the high-end battle strength. When the time comes, you can contact the royal family and gain some strength. In this way, you really want to overthrow Gus. Princess Carol's breathing became even more rapid. Clearly, she was tempted. Even though the possibility of that happening was still very small, it was still possible. However, she did not let it go to her head. Instead, she frowned and asked, "Why are you helping me? Why are you interfering in the battle for the throne of Zhulu country? What do you, or should I say, what do you want?" Ling Shiqi raised a finger and said, "First, you must give me the Gu King." Princess Carol nodded without hesitation. The Gu King was very precious, but Sang Hetong's Gu refinement technique and the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique were more important to her. Ling Shiqi raised a second finger. "From now on, I will send people to collect some Gu worms from you every once in a while." Princess Carol understood that the other party wanted to use her to nurture Gu worms. However, this matter was going with the flow, so she agreed. Finally, Ling Shiqi looked deeply at Princess Carol and said meaningfully, "After you successfully ascend the throne, you need to join our organization." Hearing this, Princess Carol's eyes widened slightly. She understood everything. It turned out that the other party did not really want to help her ascend the throne, but wanted to use her to indirectly control the entire Zhulu country. What great ambition! She even thought that even if she really became the king in the future, she might be secretly controlled by the other party. Ling Shiqi saw through her thoughts and said, "Princess Carol, don't worry. Our organization is not a sect, but a loose one. Everyone gathered together for mutual benefits. We won't restrict Princess Carol in any way, nor do we want to plot against Zhulu country. We just want a place to live. We will help you take revenge and ascend the throne, and you will provide us with a place to live. Speaking of which, Princess Carol is the one who benefits. And the things in this mustard seed bag are my sincerity." Princess Carol closed her eyes, seemingly hesitating. Ling Shiqi was not in a hurry. He stood at the side and waited quietly. After about a quarter of an hour, Princess Carol's eyes suddenly opened. Her eyes were filled with determination. She only said one word, "Okay." Hearing this, Ling Shiqi smiled and said, "Princess Carol made a very correct decision." Princess Carol suddenly seemed to have matured a lot. She raised her hand and released a Gu worm. It was the Gu King. "This is what I promised to give you." Ling Shiqi put away the Gu King with a smile. "Your Highness, the throne is not something that can be achieved overnight. We all need to slowly accumulate strength. Therefore, in the next few years, you must lay low and secretly cultivate your forces. That is the way to go." Ling Shiqi did not want Princess Carol to expose herself in her eagerness to take revenge, so he specially reminded her. After that, they set up their contact signs and went their separate ways. The reason why Ling Shiqi would help Princess Carol take back the throne was not empty talk, it was really possible. Sang Hetong had already planted a mind-controlling Gu in Chuli. Sang Hetong was dead, so Chuli became an important trump card in Ling Shiqi's hands. In terms of battle strength, he also had 2 Deng. Moreover, he could mobilize the assassins of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Presumably, the Blood Garment Pavilion was also very interested in secretly controlling Zhulu country. Of course, the most important thing was Princess Carol's identity. Even if Princess Carol were to openly seize the throne, the Sky Origin stage experts of the Hall of Worship wouldn't interfere. That way, they wouldn't have to deal with the most troublesome force. Moreover, Ling Shiqi had tentatively scheduled this matter for a few years later. By then, his strength and influence would not be weak, and Zhulu country would be his target. Chapter 394. The next day, Yu Ruifeng brought Ling Shiqi and a few Dark Thunder Guards into the palace and finally began their purpose for coming to Zhu Road country, which was to hold them accountable. Actually, at this time, it wasn't that important to hold them accountable because everyone knew the truth of the matter. All of this was done by Sang and Tong behind the scenes. Therefore, this accountability became a formality. In the end, Zhu Road country paid a considerable amount of resources and left the matter unsettled. For Yu Ruifeng, although Gus, who was in the pro-war faction, ascended to the throne, Zhu Road country had lost a large number of experts and imperial guards. In the next few years, it would be impossible for them to cause any more trouble. At least he could answer to the higher-ups. After that, Leng Shiqi followed Yu Ruifeng on the journey back to West Desolate Province. When they came, there were more than 20 people, but when they returned, there were only 6 left. Therefore, their speed was even faster and they only took 9 days to return to West Desolate City. As soon as they returned to West Desolate City, Yu Ruifeng plunged into busy matters. They had to carefully consider and report the information of their trip to Zhu Road country. In addition, in the month that Yu Ruifeng left, there was a thick pile of official documents piled up in West Desolate Province. It was enough to keep him busy for a while. Leng Shiqi and Guan Feihong rested in West Desolate City for a day and prepared to return to Lanqi City. Before leaving, he specially went to say goodbye to Yu Ruifeng. Who knew that Yu Ruifeng would make a decision that surprised Leng Shiqi? He actually wanted Leng Shiqi to be the great supervisor of the North County. And the current great supervisor, Duan Chun, planned to be transferred to the South County to fill the vacancy of Yuan Song. This matter was of course a good thing for Leng Shiqi, but he still had a trace of worry in his heart. That was, why did Yu Ruifeng do this? If it was to win him over, he had already given him 10% of the cultivation resources in the Gu God sect. Now, not only did he give him resources, but he also wanted to give him an official position. This was a bit too solicitous. Yu Ruifeng was a dignified inspector, yet he was fawning over Leng Shiqi. This made Leng Shiqi suspicious, so he said modestly, "How could this humble servant be qualified to assume the position of great inspector?" Yu Ruifeng explained, during this mission in Zhu Lu country, the elites of the Dark Thunder Guard suffered heavy losses. The South region's great supervisor, Yuan Song, has died. However, the current inspectors in South County were either too inexperienced or did not have enough cultivation, so it was best to transfer a senior inspector over. Not long ago, you destroyed the Profound Yang sect, so you can be said to be famous in the North region. Moreover, you are now at the Spirit Aperture Realm middle stage. With your ability, I believe you can suppress the North region. However, the other inspectors in the North County will not easily submit to me, Leng Shiqi said hesitantly. Yu Ruifeng said meaningfully, "That's up to you. Just don't make a big deal out of it." With this, Leng Shiqi smiled in his heart. He cupped his hands and said, "Since Sir trusts this humble servant so much, then this humble servant will accept this position. However, this humble servant has a small request, please allow it." "HM? Let's hear it." "It's like this. Milord, you've seen how this lowly one obtained his cultivation. This humble servant's cultivation is not very stable right now, so I want to go into seclusion for a while to consolidate my cultivation." Yu Ruifeng lowered his eyes. After thinking for a while, he said, "Okay, I'll give you 3 months at most." "Thank you, sir, for your understanding." A few days later, Leng Shiqi and Guan Feihong finally returned to Lanqi City's Dark Thunder Manor after more than a month. When they stepped into Dark Thunder Manor, Wei Guan, who had been promoted to Dark Thunder Guard, saw them immediately. Crash! The books in Wei Guan's hands all fell to the ground. He ran over in surprise and shouted, "Sir! Sir, you're finally back." When Leng Shiqi saw Wei Guan's surprise and relief, his heart tightened. He asked, "Did something happen in Dark Thunder Manor?" Wei Guan opened his mouth, but his expression dimmed. He didn't know what to say. At this moment, Qian Ming, Qiu Cheng, and Xiao Qian heard the commotion and rushed over. They all had gloomy expressions. When they saw Leng Shiqi, they finally dispersed. Something really did happen. However, Leng Shiqi was still very calm. He said, "Let's go to the meeting hall and talk." After they took a seat in the meeting hall, Leng Shiqi directly asked Qiu Cheng. He was the most qualified person here. "Tell me, what happened?" Qiu Cheng muttered to himself, as if he was organizing his words, "Sir, not long after you left, Yuzimo came looking for us." Yuzimo? Who's that? This name sounded familiar to Leng Shiqi, but he definitely didn't know this person. Yuzimo is also a supervisor. The area he is in charge of is adjacent to ours. After he arrived, he immediately asked us to give him half of our monthly tribute. Leng Shiqi's expression sank. His spirit aperture realm 5th layer cultivation was uncontrollably activated, and a formless spirit pressure was released. The others were surprised and delighted. When Leng Shiqi was in the spirit pulse realm, he was able to fight against spirit aperture realm experts. Now that he had broken through to the spirit aperture realm, Yuzimo was no longer a threat. Leng Shiqi's mind was spinning rapidly, but he let Qiu Qing continue. Of course we didn't want to, but we don't know where Yuzimo found. At this point, Qiu Cheng's eyes flickered. He was a bit hesitant, but he still said, he found evidence that Sir dealt with Gong Sun Bing and his cronies. When Qiu Qing said this, Leng Shiqi could more or less guess the ins and outs of the matter. That Yuzimo was simply jealous of the windfall he made around Lan Qi City, but Yuzimo didn't have the ability to imitate Leng Shiqi's methods. Thus, he wanted to take advantage of Lan Qi City's absence to interfere. When Leng Shiqi got rid of Gong Sun Bing and his cronies, he did leave behind some traces that couldn't be investigated. He didn't expect that Yuzimo, the supervisor, would specifically investigate this matter. In other words, Yuzimo had something on Leng Shiqi and used it to blackmail him and take away the tribute. However, Leng Shiqi thought deeper. Where did Yuzimo get the guts to do this? It wasn't that Leng Shiqi thought too highly of himself. When he left the West Desolate Province, that was when his reputation was at its peak. Moreover, his public smuggling was tacitly approved by Yu Ruifeng. As a supervisor, Yuzimo came looking for trouble right after Leng Shiqi left. Wasn't he afraid that Leng Shiqi would come back for revenge? Obviously, there must be someone behind Yuzimo who was supporting him. That person was undoubtedly Duan Chun. Chapter 395. Duan Chun, the supervisor of the North County, had joined forces with Yuzimo to cause trouble, which gave Leng Shiqi a headache. At this moment, Leng Shiqi made a sound of surprise. Only now did he realize that Qin Jianchen was not here. He asked, "Where is Qin Jianchen?" Qiu Cheng and the others paused for a moment. Qian Ming continued, "Sir, when Yuzimo first came, Qin Jianchen fought with him, but he was seriously injured by Yuzimo. During this time, he was in seclusion to recuperate, so he did not come to welcome you." Leng Shiqi's face turned completely cold. Traces of killing intent filled the air, causing the temperature of the meeting hall to drop. Qian Ming saw this and said in a low voice, "Sir, we should not act rashly. After all, Yuzimo has something on us." Leng Shiqi retracted his killing intent, and a cold smile appeared on his face. "Yuzimo, Duan Chun. Pass down the order." They immediately straightened their bodies and waited for Leng Shiqi to give the order. However, Leng Shiqi said, "Yuzimo should know about my return soon. He must be waiting for me to make a move. From today onwards, have all the Dark Thunder Guards withdraw. Do not let anyone have anything on us. If Yuzimo comes to ask for resources next time, do not fight. Give him as much as he wants." What? They were shocked when they heard this. They did not know what Leng Shiqi was trying to do. Guan Feihong, on the other hand, rolled his eyes and laughed sinisterly. He said, "This subordinate obeys." Leng Shiqi stood up and said, "From now on, I will go into seclusion. No matter what happens, I will endure it. Whatever they swallow now, I will make them spit it out twice as much in the future." As soon as he finished speaking, Leng Shiqi took a step forward, and his figure instantly vanished on the spot like a ghost. Qiu Cheng and Qiu Qian were a little confused. Qian Ming lowered his head thoughtfully. Guan Feihong said, "Do you think that Yuzimo, a supervisor, dares to mess with us? With Sir's strength, it would not be difficult to quietly get rid of Yuzimo. However, Sir's real opponent is the person behind Yuzimo. Since Sir has already given the order, the most important thing for us to do while Sir is in seclusion is to endure." Qiu Qian and Guan Feihong looked at each other and then nodded solemnly. After Leng Shiqi returned to his room, he released dozens of goo worms to hide around his room to protect him. He waved his hand, sprinkled 500 mid-grade spirit stones into the formation. And in an instant, rich heaven and earth spiritual qi quickly gather, the rich heaven and earth spiritual energy quickly, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth quickly, the entire room was filled the room. That was a mist with smoke completely condensed. Then, Leng Shiqi sat cross-legged in the center of the yin and yang spirit gathering array and absorbed the spiritual energy into his body. He's His had come too quickly. Now, what he needed most was to do his best to consolidate it. Then, he divided his consciousness into two. While purifying his spiritual energy, he was also constantly deducing and fusing spiritual skills. Finally, Leng Shiqi raised his head and swallowed a fasting pill he found in the mulberry tree. From then on, he entered a state of seclusion. 11 days later, Leng Shiqi opened his eyes. At the same time, his eyes became brighter and brighter. He had also removed the soul-splitting technique. At this moment, his spiritual energy had become much purer. The reason he stopped was because the system's upgrade had been completed. Leng Shiqi opened the system with some anticipation. First of all, the system gave him the first impression that the interface was much more refined. He habitually opened his own information first. Name, Leng Shiqi, Lu Xingji, Cultivation, Spirit Aperture Realm Level 5 Status, Peak Bloodline, Dark Shadow Clan, Unknown Management Authority, 37% System Energy, 13%, System Coins, 1382. Leng Shiqi raised his eyebrows. There was an additional entry for System Energy in his information. His eyes narrowed as if he had thought of something. Then, he took out a level 4 spiritual sword from his mustard seed bracelet and sold it to the system. He received 168 system coins. Leng Shiqi's eyes were fixed on the words System Energy. Sure enough, after he sold the level 4 spiritual sword, the 13% behind the words suddenly flashed. However, the number did not change. At the same time, an inexplicable, undetectable energy appeared in his body. The energy was very, very weak, but it gave people a very strange feeling. It wasn't spiritual power, nor was it demonic aura or baleful aura. Leng Shiqi couldn't tell what kind of feeling it was, because it disappeared in a flash. Leng Shiqi's eyes flashed. He sold the astral wood spiritual spear he used before to the system. Then, he immediately closed his eyes and carefully sensed it. Sure enough, a strand of that strange energy appeared in his body again. Leng Shiqi now understood that the system energy was the energy that the system obtained after he sold the items to the system. Because he had 37% of the system's authority, a small part of the energy was transferred to him. Although he still didn't know what that power was, he was sure that it was something extraordinary. After figuring this out, Leng Shiqi opened his bag, map, and system store. There were 6 more empty slots in his bag, which was a small surprise. The map system did not change much, but there was an additional marking function. As for the number of items in the system store, it increased from 4 to 8. After checking these subsidiary systems, Leng Shiqi looked forward to seeing if there were any changes to the lottery system. After he broke through to the spiritual pulse realm, there were no new lottery options. This time, there should be. He clicked on the lottery page, and there was finally an option called Advanced Lottery, which made Leng Shiqi secretly happy. However, when he saw the system coins required for the Advanced Lottery, he was a little shocked. The Advanced Lottery actually required 1,000 system coins. This was the same price as the Unlimited Lottery. However, Leng Shiqi immediately felt that the advantage of the Advanced Lottery over the Unlimited Lottery was that it was more stable. When he had the Unlimited Lottery before, he had gotten the beginner and intermediate prizes several times. It was really a loss. The Advanced Lottery would definitely give him the advanced prizes. Although he could not win a lot with a small amount, he would not lose money. Leng Shiqi wanted to try it twice, but before that, he had something more important to do, which was to activate another subsidiary system. System upgrade successful. Administrator, please select the system you want to activate. Chapter 396. When Leng Shiqi saw the system prompt, he swiped down and 3 alternative subsidiary systems suddenly appeared in front of him. They were Mission System, Pet System, and Equipment System. Among these 3 subsidiary systems, Leng Shiqi could only choose to open one of them, so he began to carefully examine the 3 subsidiary systems. First was the Mission System. Missions were easy to understand. They were nothing more than missions issued by the system. After completing them, he would receive a certain reward. Leng Shiqi looked carefully and found that the mission system also contained many subcategories, such as main missions, daily missions, random missions, travel missions, treasure hunting missions, and so on. It seemed to be quite rich. However, after thinking for a while, Leng Shiqi directly excluded the mission system. There were 2 reasons. First, the system's missions were more or less mandatory. If the mission was just to his liking, it would be fine. But if the mission issued by the system was not something he wanted to do, or if it was not his style of doing things, he would feel very uncomfortable. Of course, the most important thing was that he did not want to be bound by the system's missions. The second reason was that he was traumatized by it. Leng Shiqi remembered very clearly that when he was still on Blood Mist Island, he worked hard to complete the mission. What did he get in the end? A high-grade Mount pill. The heart-wrenching feeling at that time was still imprinted in his heart, leaving him with lingering fear. Therefore, he did not consider the mission system for the time being. Then he began to study the pet system. The pet system also had many small functions, such as pet summoning, pet strengthening, pet upgrading, pet skills, pet equipment. There was a whole bunch of them. It was like a game to cheat money. Leng Shiqi looked at these words, as if he could see the system coins flowing out. He did not need to think at all to know that each of these small functions must require a lot of system coins. In fact, Leng Shiqi was a little tempted because he now had something similar to a pet, the Goo King. He now only knew that the Goo King needed to devour all kinds of rare resources to advance. As for other methods to cultivate the Goo King, he did not know. Even Princess Carol, who cultivated the Goo King, did not know. If he opened the pet system, he could use the system's functions to cultivate the Goo King. Presumably, he would soon have a good combat power. For example, the purple feather on the Blood Mist Island was very convenient to use. Therefore, the pet system was on the Leng Shiqi's list of options. However, whether or not he would choose it would depend on the equipment system. Leng Shiqi then looked at the equipment system. This equipment system was a little different from what Leng Shiqi had imagined. At first, he thought that it was just a system that provided attributes and characteristics when placed in the grid. However, after looking at it for a while, he realized that it was actually a system for strengthening and upgrading equipment. Among the functions, there were equipment strengthening, equipment refining, equipment recasting, equipment embedding, and so on. Seeing these words, Leng Shiqi's eyes lit up. Spiritual weapons could be said to be the most direct way to increase one's strength. He had several level 5 spiritual weapons on him. He even had the Devil Advent Battle Saber, a 6th grade spiritual weapon. And the Divine Goo Ring, a rank 7 treasure. If he activated the equipment system, some of the spiritual equipment that he usually used would be greatly enhanced. The Devil's Arrival Battle Saber might even be upgraded to Tier 7. He was really tempted. However, after looking at the pet system and the equipment system, he felt that the system was trying to trick him into topping up money. Whether it was the pet system or the equipment system, it obviously cost a lot of system coins. However, it could indeed increase his strength. The saying that one could become stronger by topping up money had become true. Leng Shiqi was not afraid of topping up money. As his strength and influence increased, he would be able to obtain more and more resources. It was not a big deal to spend all of it on the system. What he was most conflicted about now was which system to choose. To be honest, he wanted both systems, but he had to give up on one. The pet system was an extra help. The equipment system could strengthen weapons. Ling Shiqi fell into deep thought. After half an hour, Ling Shiqi gritted his teeth and made a decision. He decided to choose the pet system. There were 3 reasons. First of all, Ling Shiqi did not have a high demand for spiritual equipment. He had just obtained the Devil's Arrival Battle Saber and the Divine Gu Ring from the resources of the Gu God sect. These were enough for him to use for a long time. Secondly, no matter how powerful his spiritual equipment was, he was still one person. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. There were many times when he could not split himself. If he could cultivate a powerful pet, it could help him do a lot of things that others did not know about. Thirdly, after activating the pet system, Ling Shiqi did not only cultivate the Gu King as a pet. As long as he was willing to spend money, he could even cultivate several powerful pets at the same time. These were things that the spiritual equipment could not bring him. Therefore, he made this decision. Then he said, I choose the pet system. Pet system activated. Open the pet space. Ling Shiqi saw a stream of light flash on the system interface. There was an additional, pet, option. He immediately opened the pet system and found that there were only 3 small functions: pet summon, pet bind, and pet upgrade. As for the rest, he was afraid that he would have to wait for the system to be upgraded again. Ling Shiqi first opened the pet summon page. There were 2 ways to summon pets: normal summon and advanced summon. Normal summon cost 500 system coins per summon. The potential of the summoned pet would be between white, green, and blue. Advanced summon cost 3,000 system coins per summon. The potential of the pet would be between blue, purple, and gold. In other words, the worst pet that could be drawn from the advanced lottery would be a blue pet. Ling Shiqi's mouth twitched when he saw the price of the pet summon. The system was really cheating him. Fortunately, he already had the Gu King and did not need to summon pets. Therefore, he clicked on the pet bind page. Now, Ling Shiqi could only have 1 pet at most. He immediately summoned the Gu King and a system prompt appeared in front of his eyes. Discovered a purple pet. Bind? Ling Shiqi was a little surprised when he heard that the Gu King's potential was purple. Although the Gu King had the word king, it was only cultivated from many ordinary Gu worms. Moreover, the cultivation method was not very good. Ling Shiqi was slightly happy that it had a purple quality. This helped him save thousands of system coins. He immediately said, yes. Immediately, Ling Shiqi suddenly felt an inexplicable connection between himself and the Gu King. He could order the Gu King to do anything at any time. Even if he asked it to self-destruct now, it would not hesitate at all. Finally, Ling Shiqi looked at the pet upgrade option that he cared about the most. The reason why he chose the pet system was that he wanted to increase the Gu King's strength in a short period of time so that it could help him do something. The pet upgrade page was very simple. It showed that the Gu King's current level was a rank 1 monster. There were 2 ways to upgrade a pet. One was to feed it experience pills. There would be a special slot in the system shop for experience pills. The other was to follow the master and cultivate. When the master cultivated, the pet would share 10% of the experience. Of course, for Ling Shiqi, there was a 3rd way. That was to let it eat all kinds of rare materials. Ling Shiqi thought about it and decided to use all 3 methods. Chapter 397. Ling Shiqi logged out of the system and took out all the resources he didn't need. They almost filled up his room. Then, he divided the resources into 3 parts. He kept the most precious high-grade resources and prepared to give them to 9 Leave. He didn't forget that he still owed half of the resources to Xianyang sect. Originally, he planned to give 9 leave the resources of the big families in several cities. Although the quality of these people's resources was a bit low, there were a lot of them. However, Duan Chun and Yuzimo intervened halfway, so there weren't many resources left. So, Ling Shiqi had to keep some for himself. The rest was divided into 2 parts. One part was to be sold to the system, and the other part was to be eaten by the Gu King. Ling Shiqi waved his hand, and the large pile of resources in front of him suddenly disappeared into the world, turning into more than 6,000 system coins. Combined with what he had before, he now had 8,000 system coins. He opened the shop system again. After opening the pet system, the shop system had also changed. There were 2 sub-options, random and pet. Ling Shiqi clicked on the pet shop. There were 2 boxes, selling beginner pet experience pills and intermediate pet experience pills. The prices were 100 system coins and 300 system coins, respectively. Ling Shiqi frowned. He had quite a lot of system coins, but it was still far from enough to cover all his expenses. This was because he also wanted to open the map system. Just this alone would cost him 10,000 system coins. In addition, he had just activated the advanced lottery option, and he really wanted to try it out a few times. In this way, he was really a little stretched. Ling Shiqi hesitated for a moment, then bought 10 beginner pet experience pills to see the effects. He fed 1 beginner pet experience pill to the Gu King. Then, the Gu King's body flashed, and its aura soared, instantly reaching the limit of a rank 1 monster. Ling Shiqi was delighted. It seemed that the beginner pet experience pill was quite effective. He fed it another pill, and the Gu King's body began to swell. Its body grew 2 or 3 times bigger, and it was already the size of a thumb. And it was already a 2nd-rank demonic beast. 2 basic pet experience pills had allowed the Gu King to advance to Tier 2. Ling Shiqi couldn't help but smile. However, he couldn't smile after that. This was because after the Gu King was promoted to Stage 2, the effect of the beginner pet experience pill was greatly reduced. Even after eating the remaining 8 pills, he still didn't advance. Ling Shiqi had no choice but to feed it the resources that he had prepared. After swallowing 30 to 40% of the resources, the Gu King finally showed signs of advancement. However, the Gu King had also fallen into a deep slumber because of this. It seemed that the qualitative change between rank 2 and rank 3 still required a slow evolution. Ling Shiqi placed the Gu King into the pet slot. Then, he looked at the remaining 7,000 system coins and decided to try the advanced lottery draw twice. As for the remaining 5,000 gold coins, he would save them for the time being. Not only would he be able to prepare for the opening of the entire map, but he would also be able to purchase items from the random shop at any time. He clicked on the lottery page and immediately clicked on the advanced lottery draw twice. A dazzling light flashed, and 2 things appeared in front of him. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the advanced prize, Supreme Grade Sharp Spear Talisman. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the advanced prize, Soaring Feather. Ling Shiqi picked up the 2 items. The Supreme Grade Sharp Spear Talisman was a piece of purple gold talisman paper. It was a kind of item that strengthened spiritual weapons. After using it, it could greatly increase the sharpness of the spiritual weapon. He immediately took out the Ink Jade Sword and the Demon's Arrival Battle Saber. These were the 2 spiritual weapons that he used most frequently and were also the strongest. He looked at the Ink Jade Sword and then looked at the Demon's Arrival Battle Saber. After thinking for a while, he still felt that the Supreme Grade Sharp Spear Talisman was more suitable for the Ink Jade Sword. The Demon's Arrival Battle Saber was already an upper grade Stage 6 spiritual weapon. Even if he used the Supreme Grade Sharp Spear Talisman on it, it wouldn't be able to advance to Stage 7. At most, it would just be icing on the cake. This was because spiritual weapons above Stage 7 didn't just need to be sharp and tough. They also needed to have their spirituality activated. Therefore, it was more suitable to use it on the Ink Jade Sword. Ling Shiqi placed the Supreme Grade Sharp Spear Talisman on the Ink Jade Sword. In a split second, the ink jade sword released rays of purple and gold light. The sword body also started to tremble in his hand. Traces of sharpness constantly assaulted his face, causing Leng Shiqi to feel waves of pain on his face. After a moment, the ink jade sword suddenly screeched. The light on the sword body suddenly converged. The ink jade sword actually advanced to stage 6 spiritual weapon. Leng Shiqi was surprised and happy. He held the ink jade sword and felt the sharpness on it. He couldn't help but smile. Although he didn't choose to activate the equipment system, he used the lottery to advance the ink jade sword. Now, he had 2 stage 6 spiritual weapons. This was something that normal spirit aperture stage cultivators wouldn't even dare to think about. He didn't have to worry about spiritual weapons for a short period of time. He was also a little glad that he chose the pet system. Putting away the ink jade sword, Leng Shiqi picked up the pure white feather beside it. This was the soaring feather. It was a tool used to strengthen wings. Unfortunately, Leng Shiqi didn't have wings. Although he had some soaring sky goo that could allow him to stay in the air for a short period of time, they weren't real wings. Thus, he could only leave the soaring feather to collect dust. In the end, the only thing Leng Shiqi had to do was to enter the infinite lottery again. Every time the system was upgraded, it would give Leng Shiqi a free unlimited lottery draw. However, for the current Leng Shiqi, he wasn't looking forward to the unlimited lottery draw. After all, he had suffered a lot in it. Thus, Leng Shiqi casually clicked on the infinite lottery. The system prompt appeared. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the intermediate prize, Desert Golden Sand. Seeing that he only got the intermediate prize, Leng Shiqi thought to himself, as expected. As for the Desert Golden Sand, it was a pretty good refining material. He directly took it to the bottom of his chest. At this point, after the system upgraded, he had done all the things he needed to do. He had also done all the research he needed to do. After Leng Shiqi tidied up, he once again entered a state of cultivation. However, what he didn't know was that in these 2 days, Yuzimo brought people to Dark Thunder Manor in Lan Chi City. Yuzimo had long known that Leng Shiqi had returned. He thought that Leng Shiqi would be furious and go to settle accounts with him. He even prepared how to deal with it and how to suppress Leng Shiqi. But what Yuzimo didn't expect was that he didn't see Leng Shiqi's shadow even after waiting for several days in his own territory. He asked around and found out that Leng Shiqi actually went into closed-door cultivation after returning. This made Yuzimo a little surprised and doubtful. He, Yuzimo, had swallowed half of Leng Shiqi's resources and even injured Qin Jianchen. How could Leng Shiqi tolerate this? As far as he knew, Leng Shiqi was absolutely not like this. Gradually, it was Yuzimo who couldn't sit still anymore. He hesitated for a day or 2 before deciding to personally come to Lan Chi City to test things out. Chapter 398. Yuzimo led a few Dark Lightning emissaries into Dark Thunder Manor, waving his hand to summon a few Dark Lightning guards. He narrowed his eyes and asked, "Where's your supervisor, Lu Xingji? Call him out." Yuzimo's attitude was extremely arrogant. He was on the same level as Leng Shiqi, but he had crossed the jurisdiction of Dark Thunder Manor without permission. He had even specifically asked to see Leng Shiqi. This kind of behavior could be said to be condescending. And the reason he did this was to provoke Leng Shiqi. It would be best if Leng Shiqi could take the initiative to attack him. Then he would have another weakness in his hands, and he would definitely be able to control Leng Shiqi. However, the Dark Lightning guard in front of him said expressionlessly, "Lord Lu is in seclusion and is not receiving guests." This Dark Lightning guard was actually an assassin from Blood Cloak Pavilion, so he naturally wouldn't give Yuzimo any face. Seclusion? What seclusion? Call him out. Yuzimo directly roared. At this time, Guan Feihong, Qiao Qian, and the other Dark Lightning emissaries heard the commotion and hurried over. Guan Feihong revealed a kind smile, stepped forward, and cupped his fists. "So Lord Yu has arrived. Please come in." Yuzimo stared at Guan Feihong. He hadn't seen Guan Feihong the last time he came. He heard that Leng Shiqi had brought Guan Feihong to Zhulu. Now it seemed that this Guan Feihong wasn't easy to deal with. Yuzimo said sternly, "You're not worthy to speak to me. Call Lu Xingji out." Lord Lu is already in seclusion. He said that everything in Dark Thunder Manor will be managed by me, so this one can more or less make some decisions. You can really make decisions? Yuzimo's eyes flashed with a suspicious look. This one can make decisions on ordinary matters. Guan Feihong didn't say too much. Yuzimo snorted. What I'm about to say isn't ordinary. Since you can't make decisions, you should call Lu Xingji out. Guan Feihong's smile did not diminish in the slightest. He said, Sir also said that if something big happens, we should put it aside first and deal with it after he comes out of seclusion. Yuzimo's face turned gloomy. You mean, Lu Xingji won't come out to see me? Sir, please don't make things difficult for me. Guan Feihong's smile became even more amiable. But Yuzimo said, what if I insist on making things difficult for you? Guan Feihong smiled and said, Lord, you must be joking. Why would Lord you bother with us subordinates? The more Yuzimo talked with Guan Feihong, the more he felt that the man was slippery. What Guan Feihong meant was that if he made things difficult for the Dark Lightning envoys, he would lose his status. However, if he didn't make things difficult for them, it would be equivalent to slapping his own face. Suddenly, Yuzimo laughed. Ha ha ha, this envoy was just joking with you all. Why take it so seriously? Ha 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 ha, Qiu Cheng and the others also laughed, but their laughter was extremely awkward. Guan Feihong waved his arm and said, please come inside for a chat. Yuzimo didn't say anything and went straight into the meeting hall. When he saw the jade chair in the main seat, he sneered in his heart. He secretly thought that Leng Shiqi really knew how to enjoy life. Then, he sat down on the jade chair with a look of enjoyment on his face. Guan Feihong was still able to maintain his smile, but the faces of the others fell. Yuzimo patted the chair and said, oh, this chair is really good. Only someone as rich as Lord Lu can afford to sit on it. Speaking of this, Yuzimo suddenly changed the topic. Unfortunately, this envoy's purse is shy. Someone come. At this time, Guan Feihong suddenly shouted. Yuzimo was slightly surprised and secretly became vigilant. He thought that Leng Shiqi had set a trap. But then, a group of people carried dozens of large wooden boxes to the door of the meeting hall. Guan Feihong pointed to the boxes and said, Lord Yu, these things are the offerings that the various great clans have handed over this month. Half of them are here. Please accept them. Yuzimo didn't show any expression of joy. Instead, his expression became serious. His purpose in coming here was to anger Leng Shiqi, including these Dark Lightning envoys. But now, not only was the other party not angry, but they were also offering up so many resources. He immediately thought of Leng Shiqi's intention, and that was to delay. But Yuzimo didn't want to delay. He looked at the boxes and said angrily, this is just a little bit of resources. Are you trying to fool me? Lord Yu, half of the offerings are here. If Lord Yu doesn't believe me, I can have someone bring the accounts. Half? Yuzimo smiled darkly. Who told you that I wanted half? From today onwards, you will give me 70%. What? 70%? Qiao Qian and the others were shocked and angry. Even Guan Feihong's smile faded a little. He could see that Yuzimo had come here to cause trouble. His goal was to force Leng Shiqi out. Guan Feihong even guessed that all of this was supported by Duan Chun. Although Leng Shiqi had told him to give Yuzimo as much as he wanted before he went into seclusion, this time, he had given him 70%. What about next time? What about next time? In the end, if Yuzimo took it all, would they give it to him or not? Just as Guan Feihong didn't know how to respond, a voice sounded. Don't even think about it. The voice sounded very calm, but it was filled with an unquestionable tone. Everyone looked at the door. At this time, there stood a figure dressed in black holding a long sword. It was Qin Jianchen. And his cultivation was at the Spirit Aperture Realm. Qin Jianchen's appearance at the Spirit Aperture Realm was beyond everyone's expectations. Even Guan Feihong and the other Dark Lightning envoys were shocked. Qin Jianchen had been seriously injured by Yuzimo some time ago and should still be recovering. How could he have broken through to the Spirit Aperture Realm? Of course, the most shocked person was Yuzimo. He remembered clearly that when he first came here, Qin Jianchen was the only one who had stopped him. At first, Yuzimo didn't put Qin Jianchen, who was at the 9th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm, in his eyes. After all, he was at the 6th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm. But Qin Jianchen's sword was too fast. It was so fast that it was strange. It was so fast that Yuzimo felt threatened. Therefore, Yuzimo had no choice but to take it seriously, which was why he had seriously injured Qin Jianchen. However, in just a month, Qin Jianchen had not only recovered from his injuries, but his cultivation had also broken through to the Spirit Aperture Realm. How could Yuzimo not be shocked? Qin Jianchen gripped the hilt of his sword tightly and said, "Thanks to you, my cultivation has improved. I don't know if you can still seriously injure me today." Chapter 399. Yuzimo opened his mouth to say something, but Qin Jianchen's sword had already arrived. The others didn't even see when Qin Jianchen's sword had struck. They only saw the black sword light, which was as thin as a strand of hair, arrive in front of Yuzimo. Yuzimo hastily used his spirit armor, and at the same time, a sword appeared in his hand. The sword was covered in blue light, and a blue sword light was slashed out like a waterfall. However, Qin Jianchen's sword easily pierced through the blue waterfall and tore apart Yuzimo's spirit armor. When the tip of the sword was about to pierce Yuzimo's heart, he hurriedly punched out. A pair of gloves covered his fist, which bloomed with a dense spirit light, greeted the attack. With an ear-piercing sound of collision, Yuzimo's body knocked over the jade chair, and he was forced back 8 steps. Qin Jianchen, on the other hand, was only forced back 3 steps. Yuzimo's fists were still trembling slightly, and 2 cracks had appeared on his gloves. His heart was filled with shock, anger, hatred, and even a bit of shame and annoyance. He was at the 6th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm, but he had actually lost to Qin Jianchen, who had just entered the Spirit Aperture Realm. Even if Qin Jianchen's attack had been very sudden, it shouldn't have been like this. This could only mean that Qin Jianchen's strength was very strong. However, for Qin Jianchen, being able to force Yuzimo back a few steps was already his limit. Moreover, he could only use that sword technique a few times. If he were to fight Yuzimo head-on, he didn't have much confidence. However, Qin Jianchen still stared coldly at Yuzimo, as if he would fight him to the death. At this time, the 3 Dark Lightning envoys who had followed Yuzimo finally reacted, but Qianming, Qiu Cheng, and the others stepped forward to block them. The atmosphere in the meeting room instantly became tense. Although Yuzimo was surprised in his heart, he thought about it for a moment and became happy instead. He immediately shouted, "How bold of you! You dare to offend your superior? Where are the rules of the Dark Lightning Guard?" "Gu Xiaoping. I am here." A Dark Lightning envoy behind Yuzimo replied. "Offending your superior? What is the punishment?" "According to the rules of the Dark Thunder Guards, cripple his cultivation and send him to the death cell." Yuzimo sneered as he looked at Qin Jianchen. "Last time, I didn't pursue the matter because you were seriously injured. This time, you actually dared to attack me in public. You really haven't changed." Guan Feihong also felt that Qin Jianchen was being a little impulsive, which gave Yuzimo another opportunity to use against him. However, he didn't blame Qin Jianchen. When Leng Shiqi explained the matter, Qin Jianchen wasn't present. Everyone knew that he was recuperating, so they didn't disturb him. Moreover, Qin Jianchen was now in the Spirit Aperture Realm. If he was in the Blood Cloak Pavilion, he would be a silver-striped blood cloak assassin, which was one level higher than Guan Feihong. Even if Qin Jianshan wanted to blame him, he had no right to do so. Qin Jianshan did not answer Yu Zimo, but the fighting spirit in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. Yu Zimo also frowned. He had fought with Qin Jianshan twice, and he knew very well that if he wanted to take down Qin Jianshan, he would have to use his trump card. If he was not careful, he might end up getting injured. But if he didn't make a move, wouldn't he lose face by saying such big words? The Dark Thunder manor of Mist Chi City was really strange. With the old fox Guan Feihong and the stubborn madman Qin Jianshan, he felt a bit of a headache. 70%. 70% it is. At this time, Guan Feihong shouted. He said to Yu Zimo, "Lord Yu, I will send someone to deliver 70% of the resources to your manor." Guan Feihong's timely words gave Yu Zimo a way out of the embarrassing situation. He nodded his head with satisfaction and said, "Well, it seems you have a clear view of the situation. In that case, I will not pursue Qin Jianshan's offense. I still have important matters to attend to, so I will take my leave." "Oh right, I will be back at this time next month." Ha ha ha. After Yu Zimo left Dark Thunder Manor with a smile, everyone's face was gloomy. Especially Qiao Qian and Qiu Cheng. They had never suffered such humiliation before. They only felt that their hearts were filled with unwillingness. Qin Jianshan, who had always been a man of few words, said at this time, "I am still too weak." It was unknown whether he was saying this to himself or to everyone else. After he finished speaking, he strode away like a meteor. The remaining few people, except for Guan Feihong, secretly clenched their fists. After this, the entire Dark Thunder manor of Mist Chi City fell into silence. Apart from the tasks that needed to be completed, everyone threw themselves into cultivating crazily. Time passed in the blink of an eye. 3 months later, Ling Shiqi finally pushed open the door to his room. The biggest difference between the current Ling Shiqi and the one from 3 months ago was that he was much calmer. His eyes were as calm and tranquil as an ancient well, but under the surface of the water, it seemed to have the power to set off huge waves at any time. Ling Shiqi walked out of his room and saw the long-awaited sunlight. He couldn't help but squint his eyes for a while. Wei Guan, who had been waiting here, immediately ran over and bowed. "Congratulations on coming out of seclusion, Lord." Ling Shiqi nodded lightly and said, "Prepare some food for me first." "Yes." Wei Guan left in a jog, while Ling Shiqi casually strolled around his courtyard. Speaking of which, he seemed to have never walked around his courtyard before. After walking around like this for a while, he felt comfortable all over. Not long after, Guan Feihong, Qin Jianshan, and the other 4 Dark Thunder envoys all came to the courtyard. Ling Shiqi saw that Qin Jianshan's cultivation was actually at the Spirit Aperture realm and couldn't help but be a little surprised. However, this surprise was immediately replaced by joy. Qin Jianshan's battle strength far exceeded that of other cultivators of the same level. Although he was only at the first level of the Spirit Aperture realm, he could definitely fight against a third-level cultivator. This could be considered a great help. Ling Shiqi scanned everyone and discovered that their cultivation had improved by quite a bit. Qiu Cheng and Xian Ming were both at the peak of the 6th level of the Spirit Aperture realm and could break through to the 7th level at any time. The one with the greatest improvement was still Qiao Qian. Ling Shiqi remembered that when he first came to Lan Chi City, Qiao Qian had just broken through to the Spirit Aperture realm. Now, only half a year had passed and he was already at the 3rd level of the Spirit Aperture realm. With his youth and aptitude, he could indeed be called a genius. As for Ling Shiqi himself, after 3 months of closed-door cultivation, his cultivation was still at the 5th level of the Spirit Aperture realm. However, the spiritual energy in his body was abnormally dense and pure. Moreover, his strength was much stronger than 3 months ago. However, he didn't know how strong he was now, so he had to find someone to test it out. The few people first congratulated Ling Shiqi, then Guan Feihong began to talk about serious matters. He first talked about Yu Zimo's arrogance in the past 3 months, then said, "Sir, in 2 days, it will be time to submit the offerings. I'm afraid Yuzimo will come again. When Leng Shiqi heard this, he muttered, just in time to practice. Qiu Cheng, go and send a message to Sir Yu Ruifeng. Chapter 400. 2 days later, the courtyard of Dark Thunder Manor was filled with hundreds of large chests, almost filling up the entire courtyard. Leng Shiqi and a few of his Dark Thunder guards were having tea in the meeting room. Leng Shiqi had been eating fasting pills for the past 3 months, so the taste in his mouth was bitter. Now that he had a full meal and had some tea, his heart was filled with satisfaction. However, the others were not as relaxed. They also knew that Leng Shiqi was already at the 5th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm. Although they were shocked, they still couldn't feel happy. Leng Shiqi indeed had a high chance of beating Yuzimo, but what about after that? Yuzimo would definitely not let go of this and report it to Duan Chun, which would lead to even more trouble. So, how could they still be in the mood to drink tea? However, they all understood Leng Shiqi's temperament. Once he made a decision, no one could change it. Not long after, 4 people walked in from outside. Seeing how they walked in, those who didn't know would think that they were the masters of Dark Thunder Manor. Yuzimo looked around at the chests in the courtyard and couldn't help but grin. These were all his. He raised his head and walked into the meeting room. He subconsciously wanted to sit on the jade chair, but then he realized that there was already someone sitting there. The moment he saw Leng Shiqi, he was surprised and said, "Oh, isn't this Lord Lu?" He didn't get the news that Leng Shiqi had come out, but he could see that Leng Shiqi was already at the Spirit Aperture Realm. However, he couldn't determine which level of the Spirit Aperture Realm he was at, so he was really surprised. However, in his opinion, Leng Shiqi was only at the 1st level of the Spirit Aperture Realm. Leng Shiqi took a sip of tea, glanced at him, and asked Guan Feihong, "Who is this guy?" Hearing this, Yuzimo's expression immediately changed. How could Leng Shiqi not know him? Yet, Leng Shiqi was asking someone else. This was clearly not putting him in his eyes. Guan Feihong even stood up and introduced him to Leng Shiqi. "Sir, this is also the supervisor of the Dark Thunder Guards, Yuzimo, Sir Yu." Yuzimo coldly stared at Guan Feihong, but Guan Feihong did not care at all. "Yuzimo? Never heard of it," Leng Shiqi said softly. Even though his voice was soft, the weakest person present was at the Spirit Pulse Realm. Everyone could hear him clearly. This time, Yuzimo did not get angry. He could see that Leng Shiqi was trying to intimidate him. However, he had come prepared. Yuzimo sneered and said, "It is not easy to see Sir Lu. I have always wanted to see Sir Lu because I want to show you a few things." As he spoke, he took out a few thin booklets from his mustard seed bag and placed a small bundle on the table. Leng Shiqi only glanced at it and lost interest. It was definitely evidence of him getting rid of Gong's son Bing and his subordinates. "Sir Lu, are you not interested in the things inside?" Yuzimo saw that Leng Shiqi was not moved at all, so he said with a sinister smile. "AI." Suddenly, Leng Shiqi let out a deep sigh. The sneer on Yuzimo's face became even stronger. Leng Shiqi said, "Some people think they are smart. They are being used as pawns by others, but they are still complacent. Some people are about to die, but they do not know. How pitiful. Who are you talking about?" Of course, Yuzimo could hear that Leng Shiqi was mocking him, so he immediately shouted. However, he did not notice that at this time, Guan Feihong and the others began to silently retreat. Leng Shiqi turned his head and looked directly at Yuzimo. His eyes were as calm as water, but it was this calm gaze that made Yuzimo feel a sense of crisis. Immediately, Leng Shiqi pushed his palm forward. Suddenly, the heaven and earth spiritual chi went berserk, and a rich dark golden brilliance appeared, condensing into a strange palm print more than 2 feet wide. The moment the palm print appeared, the power of the golden sun and the power of the underworld appeared at the same time. These two completely opposite powers were perfectly fused together by Leng Shiqi. Just the remnants of the aura that was released made Xiao Qian, an early-stage spirit pulse stage cultivator, pale. How could Yuzimo have thought that Ling Shiqi would suddenly make a move? However, with his experience with Qin Jianshan, he knew that it was too late to dodge. Ignoring everything else, Yuzimo's spiritual qi surged wildly, and on his right arm, sparkling spiritual veins and dozens of bright spiritual cavities appeared. His fist was covered with gloves, and when he punched out, dozens of huge fist shadows appeared. Each fist shadow was filled with a huge amount of power. However, these fist shadows were instantly shattered by Ling Shiqi's palm print. The palm print's power did not decrease at all, and continued to press forward. So strong. Yuzimo was finally shocked. In the face of danger, he hurriedly took out a light green talisman. A trace of heartache flashed across his eyes, and he tore open the talisman. In an instant, the meeting hall emitted a green light, and the earth trembled. Branches as thick as buckets broke out of the ground, intertwining with each other and blocking in front of him. At the same time, he quickly retreated. Bang bang bang, only the sound of branches breaking could be heard. Finally, with a boom, the entire meeting hall, along with the branches, collapsed. The remaining power of Ling Shiqi's palm print made Yuzimo's throat taste sweet, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Yuzimo looked at the ruins of the meeting hall in horror, and even his mind was a little absent-minded. He was at the 6th level of the spirit aperture realm, and no matter where he went, he could be called an expert. However, in front of that palm print, he was as weak as a low-level spirit cultivator. He even used his own trump card, a 5th-level talisman, but in the end, he was still seriously injured. Now, there was only one thought in his mind. How strong is Lu Xingji? And this move used by Ling Shiqi was one of his gains in the past 3 months. He had combined the 2 5th-level spirit techniques, the Great Golden Breaking Mountain Seal, and the Cold Underworld Palm Print, to form the current Great Yang Underworld Palm Print. Up to the Golden Sun, down to the 9 underworlds. The ultimate move created by the fusion of 2 5th-level spirit techniques was comparable to a 6th-level spirit technique, and was even stronger than an ordinary 6th-level spirit technique. In addition, Ling Shiqi had several high-level cultivation techniques, and his own strength was far superior to Yuzimo's. That was why he was able to injure Yuzimo, who had used his trump card, in one move. Ling Shiqi had succeeded in one move, and he did not want to give Yuzimo any chance to breathe. His eyes flashed with a colorful light. In Yuzimo's eyes, Ling Shiqi had actually transformed into 4 giants that were hundreds of feet tall, like the legendary gods and demons, looking at him as if he was looking at ants. 5 Gods Spirit Intimidation Technique. Chapter 401. The 5 Gods Intimidation Technique was a high-level illusion technique that originated from the 5 Gods Flowing Light Technique. Ling Shiqi had already cultivated it to the realm of large success with his own comprehension. Moreover, with the support of his majestic mental energy and the divine Gu Ring, he had instantly caused Yuzimo, a cultivator at the 6th level of the spirit aperture realm, to fall into the illusion. This was also the moment when Ling Shiqi caught Yuzimo's mind off guard. Yuzimo's mind was temporarily controlled by the 5 Gods Intimidation Technique. Ling Shiqi waved his arms, and hundreds of sword qi rose behind him. The color of these sword qi was very strange. Every sword qi was red and blue, but the color was very light and looked a little translucent. Each of these sword qis was a combination of pulse-punching sword qis, frigid frost sword qis, and Shaoyang sword qis. Every single sword qi was comparable to a 5th-tier spiritual skill, but Ling Shiqi had unleashed over 100 sword qis of the 3 severing sword. The sword qi whistled through the air and shot over. Gu Xiaoping, who had come with Yuzimo, saw that Yuzimo was in danger, but he was still in a daze. His expression changed, and he flicked his fingers, causing a few finger attacks to hit Yuzimo's body. Yuzimo was attacked by Gu Xiaoping, but it helped him recover a trace of consciousness. He relied on this trace of consciousness to instantly burn his essence blood and finally get rid of the illusion of the five gods' intimidation technique. After burning his essence blood, Yuzimo's battle strength was comparable to the late stage of the spirit aperture realm, but he did not fight back. Instead, he chose to escape. Yuzimo took out a spirit sword, and the blue sword chi rolled back, shattering the sword chi of the three gods' intimidation technique one after another. However, there were too many sword chi. Even if Yuzimo tried his best to dodge, there were still 20 to 30 sword chi of the three gods' intimidation technique that hit him. When the sword chi entered his body, Yuzimo's body trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. What shocked him even more was that after the strange sword chi entered his body, there were three completely different forces that burst out. One of them was as hot as fire, constantly burning his meridians and flesh. Another one was as cold as ice, freezing his body. The last one actually sealed his meridians, causing his spirit chi to not flow smoothly. What kind of sword chi was this? Yuzimo's body was already in a mess, and he couldn't move for a moment. His heart was extremely shaken, and he was already regretting it. Even if he had information on Ling Shiqi, he did not expect Ling Shiqi's strength. Ling Shiqi is too strong. He was so powerful that he was terrified. Would he be able to control such a person? At this moment, Yuzimo only wanted to hide at Duan Chun's place when he returned. All the plans against Ling Shiqi would be left to Duan Chun. There was nothing he could do. However, no matter how much he calculated, he did not consider one thing. That was Ling Shiqi's courage and Ling Shiqi's determination to kill him. Ling Shiqi pointed his finger, and a blood-red lightning bolt as thick as an arm shot out. In the blink of an eye, it blasted Yuzimo's head into pieces. Gu Xiaoping and the other two were instantly dumbfounded. Yuzimo was dead? Yuzimo was actually dead. They looked at Ling Shiqi's calm expression, and their eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. The three of them were terrified of Ling Shiqi's strength, and even more terrified of Ling Shiqi's madness. Ling Shiqi actually dared to kill Yuzimo, who was also a supervisor. According to the rules of the Dark Thunder Guards, this was a life for a life, but he still did it. What made Gu Xiaoping and the other two even more terrified was that Ling Shiqi's gaze turned towards them. Ling Shiqi's gaze was still very calm. He looked at the three of them as if he was looking at three lifeless rocks. Run! Gu Xiaoping shouted, and then used all his strength to explode with the fastest speed in his life to escape Dark Thunder Manor. However, he had only taken 2 steps when he realized that he could no longer move. Gu Xiaoping looked down and saw that the ground was actually covered with spider webs, and the ground of the entire courtyard was like a swamp. Not only was it difficult for him to move, it was also slowly sinking him into it. This was the bone spirit spider web formation that Ling Shiqi created by combining the Gu spirit spider web and the hand of earth. It was used to trap enemies. Not only Gu Xiaoping, but the other two were the same. Ling Shiqi once again unleashed hundreds of triple extinction sword chi, and the sword chi fell like rain. Screams were heard, and Gu Xiaoping and the other two were all dead. He secretly absorbed their remnant souls, and frowned unhappily. A good meeting room was destroyed, what a pity. Ling Shiqi's subordinates, with the exception of Qin Jianchen, were all shocked as well. They were shocked by Ling Shiqi's strength, and even more shocked by Ling Shiqi's courage. Yuzimo was a supervisor, and he was killed just like that? They had all guessed that Ling Shiqi would attack, but they never thought that Ling Shiqi would kill. Guan Feihong was the first to wake up. What he was most worried about was what to do next. Since they had already been killed, they could not be revived. Ling Shiqi killed a supervisor and 3 dark lightning envoys. The supervisor of the North County, Duan Chun, would definitely not sit by and do nothing. The most important thing now was to think of a way to deal with Duan Chun. Guan Feihong was just about to speak when he saw that Ling Shiqi actually went to pick up Yuzimo's personal mustard seed bag. Looking at his expression, he did not seem to care about this matter. Guan Feihong's mouth was open for a long time, but he could not say anything. He knew that Leng Shiqi was not an impulsive person. Since Leng Shiqi did this, he must have thought of what to do next. Right now, he only needed to listen to Leng Shiqi's orders. After picking up the mustard seed bag, Leng Shiqi asked, "Where is the Dark Lightning Manor under Yuzimo's jurisdiction?" Guan Feihong immediately replied, "It's in Deer Marshal City, about 300 li from here." Leng Shiqi nodded. "Qiu Cheng, Qiao Qian and Qin Jianshan will stay behind and finish building the meeting hall. Old Guan and Qian Ming will come with me to Deer Marshal City." The 5 of them said in unison, "We obey." After that, Leng Shiqi brought Guan Feihong and Qian Ming to Deer Marshal City. As for the remaining people, Qin Jianshan went back to consolidate his cultivation. His role in Dark Lightning Manor was to use his martial strength to intimidate the weak. Qiao Qian immediately sent people to the courtyard to prepare to rebuild the meeting hall. As for Qiu Cheng, he used all of his intelligence methods to seal up everything that happened today. 2 days later, Leng Shiqi and the other 2 arrived at Deer Marshal City. The scale of Deer Marshal City was slightly larger than Misty City. It was not as remote as Misty City, and there were more merchants coming and going. At this time, Leng Shiqi, Guan Feihong and Yuzimo walked together to the entrance of Deer Marshal City's Dark Lightning Manor. Yuzimo put on an extremely ugly expression as he walked in. He opened his mouth and shouted, "Men, open the treasury's door." Chapter 402. Yuzimo had 4 Dark Lightning envoys under him. Now that 3 of them were dead, only Lu Ziming was left in Dark Lightning Manor. Lu Ziming was also a veteran. He didn't open the door to the treasury. Instead, he hurriedly ran over. However, when he saw Leng Shiqi and Guan Feihong beside Yuzimo, he was stunned. He recognized Leng Shiqi. There was a portrait of Leng Shiqi in Dark Lightning Manor's intelligence. Naturally, he knew that Leng Shiqi was the supervisor of Lanqi City. Lu Ziming also knew that his lord had been squeezing Leng Shiqi for a few months to obtain a large amount of resources. Now that the 2 of them came together, Lu Ziming was worried. Especially when he saw Yuzimo's gloomy face, he guessed that his lord must have been defeated. Yuzimo glanced at Lu Ziming and immediately shouted, "What are you waiting for?" Lu Ziming didn't dare to disobey the order. After a slight hesitation, he jogged towards the treasury. Leng Shiqi and Guan Feihong silently followed him. When they opened the treasury door, they saw a large amount of resources inside. More than 70 to 80% of them were transported from Leng Shiqi. However, Leng Shiqi felt that it was still too little. In the past few months, the resources that Yuzimo pulled from him far exceeded what he had now. As for the rest, it must have gone into Duan Chun's pocket. Yuzimo looked around and ordered, "Move all the resources to Lanqi City." Lu Ziming turned pale with fright when he heard that. All of them? Then what about the monthly salary of the Dark Lightning Guards under them next month? However, he didn't dare to ask in front of the 2 supervisors. He only looked deeply at Leng Shiqi and went to call for his men. Leng Shiqi said in a low voice, "I've said it before. No matter how much resources Yuzimo took, he would return it with interest." Yuzimo turned and smiled, "My lord is wise." This Yuzimo was obviously Thousand Face in disguise. Leng Shiqi was never impulsive. After he came out of seclusion, he began to plan how to get rid of Yuzimo and take back his resources. Killing Yuzimo and his 3 subordinates and getting Thousand Face to impersonate Yuzimo to bring back all the resources here was the first step. Thousand Faces asked, "Your Excellency, what should we do next?" Leng Shiqi and Thousand Faces knew very well that they were able to fool Lu Mingzi because as subordinates, they did not dare to spy on their superior's cultivation. That was why Thousand Face dared to pretend to be Yuzimo, who was in the middle stage of the Spirit Aperture realm. However, this method was useless against Duan Chun, who could see through Thousand Faces' disguise with a single glance. Since that was the case, then don't let Duan Chun and Thousand Face encounter each other. Leng Shiqi said, "Immediately go and pacify the Dark Thunder Guards here." Then, Claim that you are recuperating in seclusion. I want to go to Duan Chun's place. Your Excellency. Guan Feihong and Thousand Face both looked nervous. Duan Chun was a master in the gang spirit realm. He must have something on Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi was strong enough to kill Yuzimo, but he was no match for Duan Chun. What should they do if Duan Chun used his strength to suppress them? Don't worry. Ling Shiqi waved his hand and said, how can I go to him without preparation? Besides, even if he is in the gang spirit realm, he may not be able to do anything to me. After that, Ling Shiqi left, and Guan Feihong was responsible for escorting the resources back to Lanqi City. However, both of them were thinking about Ling Shiqi's last words at the moment, and then they were both shocked. Speaking of Duan Chun, as the supervisor of North County, the city he was in was the largest and most prosperous city in North County, Hanzhou City. Duan Chun had been living a very comfortable life for the past few months because most of the resources that Yuzimo obtained from Ling Shiqi had been given to him, the great supervisor. Although there were not many high-level resources, there were a lot of them. As long as he had the resources in his hands, many things became simple. At this time, Duan Chun was sitting in the courtyard, looking at the mission information leisurely. North County was very peaceful recently, so he had nothing important to deal with, so he was relatively free. This was all thanks to Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi had killed the Xianyang sect, which could be regarded as a deterrent to those restless people in North County, so it was very quiet during this time. However, at this moment, a dark thunder guard ran in quickly from outside, but he did not make any footsteps, because Duan Chun did not like to be disturbed by noise. After running in, the man bowed his head and said nothing. Duan Chun put down the information with a little displeasure and said, tell me, what's the matter? Only then did the Dark Thunder Guard speak, Your Excellency, Supervisor Lu Xingji of Dark Thunder Mansion in Lanqi City wants to see you. Who? Duan Chun's face stiffened slightly, thinking that he had heard wrongly. Lu Xingji. Duan Chun was a little surprised when he heard this because Yuzimo had continuously sent him a lot of resources. He always thought that Ling Shiqi had already compromised. Then, why did he come to see him today? However, he had to see him. After all, he still had to give him face, so he said, please go to the hall. Yes, Your Excellency. Not long after, Ling Shiqi saw Duan Chun in the hall. After the two met, Ling Shiqi said, Duan Chun, I'm here to thank you today. Duan Chun had just walked into the hall, and before one of his feet landed, he actually stopped when he heard these words. He looked at Ling Shiqi with a strange expression, thinking that he had heard wrongly. What did you say? You didn't even hear that? Duan Chun, could it be that your eyesight has gone bad? Ling Shiqi did not give the great supervisor any face and directly mocked him coldly. Duan Chun's face instantly darkened. It had been a long time since someone dared to speak to him like this, and this person was actually his subordinate. And it was a subordinate that he had blackmail on. He immediately shouted angrily, Lu Xingji. Who gave you the guts to speak to me like this? Believe it or not, I can punish you for the crime of disrespect right now. Ling Shiqi shook his head and said, Duan Chun, you've been the great supervisor for so long, but you're still so stupid and greedy. It's not that I didn't give you any benefits for what I did in Lanqi City, but you went from bad to worse and joined forces with Yuzimo to take away more than half of my resources. Don't you think about why I dared to do this? Humph, Duan Chun sneered proudly and said, you think I don't know? You once secretly went to find Sir Yu Ruifeng, and you must have given him a lot of benefits to get his acquiescence. But so what? You secretly killed Dark Thunder envoy Gong Sun Bing and more than 20 of his Dark Thunder guards, and I have conclusive evidence here. Once this matter is exposed, even Sir Yu can't protect you. Sigh. Ling Shiqi suddenly sighed again. Duan Chun thought that he had given in, but who knew that Ling Shiqi actually asked him back, then why don't you think about it again? Why am I so unyielding and daring to be so presumptuous in front of you? You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.